Welcome to Season 7 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those who pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice and determination. Let's get on with the show. This episode of True Blue Conversations is proudly brought to you by Loudon Private Wealth, the team trusted by professionals, veterans and families across Australia to build real long-term financial security. If you want to take control of your finances, protect your future and build real generational wealth, Loudon Private Wealth are the people you want in your corner. They don't do gimmicks, they don't do hype, just smart strategy and honest advice, coupled with real-world experience. Check out the links in the description to contact Warren and the team via loudonpw.com.au or 02 8313 0418. Now let's get back to the show.
G'day, welcome back to True Blue. Today I'm coming to you live from beautiful Gold Coast, and I've got a good mate of mine who we've been teeing this podcast up for a very, very long time, and a couple of false starts with, and his health. He had a bit of an issue with his health when I was coming up last to catch up with him, but he's back on the mend now, and it is an absolute privilege to be sitting across from him. And his story is one. He's the third Vietnam veteran I've ever had on the podcast, and it is an absolute, as I say, it's a privilege to have him on. And he is served in the Vietnam War, is former SASR veteran, and is now a keynote speaker, an author, and just killing it in life after he left the army. And it is an absolute honour to have him on. So, Robert Kilsby, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, mate. Great pleasure to be here, and for your listeners as well.
We got there, mate. So, yeah, we finally got there. So,
that's right.
Mate, and as I said, we'll get into your military and what you're doing post service.
Yeah.
But, mate, before we get into that, let's go back to a young Robert. Talk me through life growing up as a young fella.
Well, it's interesting, these days, especially if people want to get their name out there and so on. It sounds like you've got to have a traumatic background or something like that to make a leg in. But in my case, I would say that I had a terrific upbringing. I was born in 1951 in a little coal mining town up in the desert in South Australia, Leigh Creek, and I was always a country boy, in South Australia for a decade and a half or more. And I was brought up by really good parents, and I was sort of brought up, I think, to put it in a nutshell, I was brought up to be independent and have a crack at anything I was interested in. And so that was sort of, a typical country upbringing, So over my years until I joined the army, I sort of lived in the desert. I lived on the Murray River a couple of times. I lived on the coast, up in Port Augusta, Hard Yards area there, and all sorts of things. And there's sort of like a Huckleberry Finn sort of upbringing. Mm-hmm. So I think that was a great thing for me, and it sort of put me on a terrific track. And a lot of the guys that had my sort of military background, interestingly enough, were a similar background. They were from the country and things like that. Not only with Australian Special Force type guys, but also the Brits and the Americans and so on. They all seem to. A lot of them seem to have that sort of background, so it's interesting.
And it does that. And most veterans and first responders I speak to do come from that. That they were kids at school that were told, "Oh God, if he only applied himself," or that he might achieve something. And did you have any brothers and sisters? Or?
Yeah. So I had an older sister, and probably she was about 6 years older than me, Lynn, And as I was growing up, she became a nurse and then was out and about. So I sort of saw her in my younger years. And then she married a grazier, up in the Flinders Ranges there, which was fantastic, and was there for, many decades after. So, but I was the oldest of four boys.
Oh, right.
So in fact, all of us were in the army at one time.
Yeah, right.
And the others were all majors in the army before they got out of it. And,
so do you still give it to them that you were the
No,
NCO and they went down the Rupert
No,
path,
not at all. I just maintain a command silence basically.
Yep.
And they give me the accolades, being son number one.
Yeah, right. And with that, what were you like at school? Were you a good scholar?
Yeah. Well, I could do anything I liked. It's probably one of the things that which I think also created me in terms of what I did later in life. At school, kids want to fit in and so on. Obviously, that's their first chance when they get together with their peer groups, so to speak. And I didn't sort of, I was a bit different from that. So I was accepted into every group that I wanted, straight in. They wanted me to be there. But I wasn't a member of any group. I didn't want to do that, so I could swing around like a starship, and so I was a bit of an alien in that sense. But I was very accepted. I played a lot of sport, obviously, led in this and that, and so had a pretty good time. I didn't find school hard at all. It was easy. So that's why if he applies himself, he should have a lot of potential.
Yeah, right.
And come the exam, I just flog it.
Right. No, so sort of gifted in that sense, mate. So
so a lot of things, obviously things that I was interested in, I used to do. But so I lived an early, quite adventurous life, I think. As a kid, and that really started me on that track, which I've maintained ever since.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and obviously we'll talk later on down in the podcast.
Yeah.
That, as you say, that adventurous to go and do what you've done post-military. And I want to talk about that because did you have any family members that had served in the military, or were you the first?
Well, on the walls of my house is a great uncle Albert who did 2 tours of the Boer War as a mounted cavalry sort of guy. He got an MID at Elbe River or something.
Yeah, right.
And then he then signed up for Gallipoli, a decade later, sort of thing. For the First World War with the light horse there. And so he went through all of that. He was never married, so he got the old sitting on the camel outside the Sphinx in 1916 there picture.
Yeah, right.
And we had a number of people in the First World War, including in the Australian Flying Corps.
Yes, I know the Flying Corps. Yep.
The origins of the RAF. And then in the Second World War, we had quite a number of guys serving in the Second World War as pilots and also soldiers and so on. And then myself, I joined up in '69. As we'll talk about later. But I think I was the only Vietnam veteran in our family. But my younger brothers, all joined the army as well, and they went to Duntroon and so on.
Yeah, right.
So we've had a fairly strong. My dad was in the Air Force during the Second World War. He was a ground crew electrician mainly, because he was an electrician before he went in. And actually, when the Hudson bombers came across from America, it had electric turrets. So they said, "You're an electrician. Jump in this mid-upper gun position." So he was in there for a little while.
Yeah, right.
But so it's not a. It was nothing we thought, it's big military background or anything, but, everyone served the country,
Yeah.
So it's probably a fairly typical Australian family. I'm fifth generation Australian, and, so.
And you mentioned that the Vietnam War was happening, 62 it started, and then you growing up as a young fella that you would have seen... you would have heard of the Battle of Long Tan in 1966, the Tet Offensive in 68, and all these things are happening. And as you mentioned, you joined the CMF, and, with Vietnam, for our civilian listeners, well, most of them would know that conscription came in, and were you thinking, I might get conscripted for this, or what was that? Like, you say you joined the CMF in 69. What was that? Were you thinking, I might get picked up by conscription?
Yeah, no, I was sort of too young for conscription. That's the first thing. And so I was, I remember sitting up the back of the class in my year, would be called year 11. It was fourth year high school. Leaving, they called it in South Australia. And was reading, that was 1968, and I was reading about the Battle of Khe Sanh actually up in the in the newspaper. So I was doing all that, and all the other kids were goofing off doing what normally kids of that age do. And I remember doing that, and so long time was I didn't know anything about that at all. That was too early for me, but so there I was. So I was 16, reading about the Battle of Khe Sanh in the newspapers and so on, and starting to get interested in that sort of things. And then I changed schools from Murray Bridge High to went to Adelaide Boys High. It was a boys' school in those days, competing with the colleges, that sort of level of state school. And then I'm not quite sure why, but I joined what it was then called the CMF, the Citizens Military Force, the Army Reserve these days. So down at the old Gallipoli Battalion, actually, the 10th Royal Australian South Australian Regiment, 10th Battalion, which has got their barracks right in the CBD of down by the Torrens there, in Adelaide. And so I was a high school student. I would have been maybe one of the only high school students. I was also, an Army Reserve soldier. So while the other kids were goofing off having parties or whatever, I was humping 3.5-inch mortars down on the camps and things, and training every week and all that. And that was actually the first time I saw my first glimpse of an SAS guy. I was up at a camp at El Alamein, for the CMF sometime, and saw an officer. He had an SAS Barrow, and I'd never heard of them or didn't know anything about it. And I asked someone there, one of the staff, I said, well, who's that guy with the funny-looking beret on? And they said, oh, that's an SAS bloke, So my experience in the CMF actually thought, well, this actually is good. It's out in the bush, it's, doing stuff, it's you're working in teams and everyone's having a crack, I thought this might be a good life. And then I thought, well, what's the best, because I was brought up this way. What's the best thing I can do? And they said, oh, that SAS bloke, they're the best. It's hard to get into and hard to stay there. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that sounds like me. Something I'll have a crack at, in my ignorance, in a sense, And then, so I left school for the second time. I left school first in actually 1968 because I reckon that my peer group, they're a bit immature, which is interesting coming from a 16-year-old. But I said to Dad, look, I got to leave school, I got to get some realism here, So I went out and worked on the land, for about 4 months, really hard yards, tough boss, as a young teenager with long blonde hair in a sheep station out on the Eyre Peninsula, Rocky Ridge country. And I got sacked, finally. I used to live by myself, and I used to get $22 a week. That was my income. $22 a week, and $12 of that used to go on board for them to feed me. And I used to be fed in the sort of work kitchen there, I live myself by a little shack, little shack out the back, and with a little wood heater and things like that. And I remember a whole bunch of 1936 Pix magazines and stuff like that was the only thing I had to read. I went shopping every now and then, and on my weekly shop when they went to town, for the shopping in the Mercedes. And I used to get them to bring me back a packet of rollies and tobacco, 5-star I remember, and a 6-pack of long neck beers, And so there I was at 16 doing that was my life. And then one day I got sick and I couldn't get out of bed in a hurry. And he came in and said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Well, I'll be there in a minute. I've just got to drag myself out of the rack here." He said, "Right, pack your gear. That's the end of you, mate." And I was working hard up to then. So that's the sort of life that you live when you're a young guy in hard yards. So, and to me, it's a great education. Every day's a school day for me. So.
And you mentioned, that you're going out there at 16, like to foresee to have, a crystal ball to see where you would be in a couple of years' time.
Looking for a challenge,
looking for that challenge. But would you say that you grew up in that time spending out on that, doing that hard work? You were like I'm guessing you're around, men. You're not with boys. You're with men, and you grew up really quickly.
Yeah, I guess so. My patrol commander later called me immature, right? So I was with some more men then. I was a patrol bongo player, sort of thing. A teenage gunslinger.
Yeah, right.
But I've always been the youngest in my cohort right through life. Right? I was the youngest in the school, every class. I was the youngest in every sports team I played. I was the youngest in the SAS Regiment for a short while, and I was certainly the youngest in my squadron overseas.
Yeah.
So that's been my life the whole way. But, I've always sort of accumulated the saying, if you're good enough, you're old enough, right? So it never bothered me too much. A lot of people ask me that question, what was it like being younger than the people you drifted with? And I said, well, I didn't even think about it. So going back, I said, right, well, I was a bit concerned that the Vietnam War, at that age, here I was a bit concerned. I thought this war's not going to last forever here. Yeah. It looks like it's been wound up a bit. And I thought, it'd be a good idea to get there before it finished. So I joined the army, the day after Armstrong landed on the moon.
Yeah, right.
Which was the 21st of July, in 69.
Yeah.
And so I always remember walking down the Rundle Street in Adelaide with my girlfriend at that time, watching him land on the moon on the TVs in the Harris Scarf or department thing through the window. But so I went obviously straight away to Kapuka,
So I just want to go back for a minute there. Yeah. So you join up the Australian Army back the day after Armstrong lands on the moon.
Yeah.
What's the process back then? Because these days,
well, it wasn't like now you got to wait for a year or something. Yeah.
So what did you do? Walk into a recruiter or what?
I just sort of I guess I did that. There was a recruiting station somewhere in King William Street or something like that, one of those, and I just went in there and said, "What's the go?" And
how do I join? Yeah, right.
The old guy said, "Come here, sign this." So obviously you go through do the tests and all those sort of things, and I think it only took a matter of 2 or 3 months or whatever it was. So I must have joined early. I must have signed, signed up early, and about quarter of the way through the year in 69. And then when I actually did the hand up, yes, I'll follow the Lord or whatever they say, whatever they say then. It was the day after the old Armstrong put his foot on the moon.
Yeah, right. So you head to Kapuka, and Kapuka's very different today. And when you went through, men were going to war. Like this was, they were getting trained.
It was a fairly big push, and they were running. That was at Kapuka near Wagga Wagga, and of course they had a lot of the conscript guys who are older than the regulars. So the regulars went to Kapuka basically. And the conscript guys went to places like Puckapunyal and places like that. Same sort of recruit training, 3 months. Right? And so that was interesting, and it was really good. Then, I put in for infantry, of course, and got it because most people went to infantry. And because the war was on, obviously they needed to keep the numbers going. And then I went up to Ingleburn where the infantry centre was in those days, from World War II sort of thing. And so I went to infantry centre there. It was interesting at infantry centre because I was the youngest again, I was the youngest in my platoon at Kapuka pretty much. I was 17 and a half. I think I was pretty close to the youngest in Kapuka. And then I went to Ingleburn and I was definitely the youngest in my platoon there as a student, infantry. And I was one of the 3 they picked up for section commanders, interesting enough, for the student section commanders. So they can kick a bit of ass or something like that. And so that was interesting, but I'd never graduated from infantry centre because we were on our last exercise, and the other guys would have their weekends off, and I was punching myself over the assault course.
Yep.
I'd do that 6 times on a Saturday and all that sort of stuff, by myself.
Well, there's nothing else to do, is there?
well, there was. You could go with the rest of them and get on the Terps and go home to mum or whatever they did. But I wasn't interested in that. I was, doing this professional track here. So they made me one of the section commanders, and in fact we were at Mittagong Bulli Pass there in the final tactical exercise, the big exercise.
Yeah, yep.
Rain in the mud and all that sort of stuff, and it was interesting in that regard. And I remember that I had an altercation with one of the guys in my section, and I mean we had 2 or 3 guys in my section just out of Long Bay Jail and all sorts of things, right? And they were older than me, of course. And I remember I had an altercation with one of them, and so we had to cuff it out the back. That was the last leadership ticket that I had left. So we had a quick punch up out the back of the pits where we just dug in. And luckily, I hit him more times than he hit me, and then we were best mates after that forever.
Right.
And at that time, they said, "Right, pays up." The old days, front up for the pay, and the young second lieutenant with a very, very nervous Lance Corporal Cook or something coming out as a gunman to protect the money, and you had to step forward, pay correct, sir, and do all that in the bush, right?
Yeah,
they used to do it in the bush, and they said, "Kilsby, pack your bags, you're going to the west," because I'd done a selection course while I was at Ingleburn.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't, I didn't pay too much attention to it in a sense because they said, "Oh, you're pretty young," And anyway, so I was selected to go on the selection course, and so I marched out of there with a good mate of mine, Lenny Smith, and went to the west. I never graduated, didn't do any graduation, so I'm not qualified as an infantryman, I suppose. I don't know. Right. So that was right near the end, and they punched me over the Perth there.
So would you say that your CMF training helped you in Kapooka, and then obviously you go to Ingleburn, and that helped you do your we'll call it now the pre-selection to go west?
Yeah, I think so. A big part of leadership actually is preparation, right? If you're prepared, you're not surprised. Right? So I breezed through Kapooka pretty much, because I'd done all weapons and bush stuff, and I understood the military, to a degree. And then I enhanced that while I was in Ingleburn. So I loved the infantry world. I loved it. And
you're the SLRs and all those weapons back then. So and the SLRs would stay in for a long time before they'd change over. And and mate, you're living a boyhood dream.
Yeah, that's right. So it's sort of like sort of the old Huckleberry Finn life continues, sort of thing to me, because I just loved it. And the harder it was, the more I loved it. Yeah, right. And so I approached it in a quasi-professional way, as much as a young person could. And you got the rewards from it.
So you head west, and how many started selection with you, and how many finished?
Yeah, well, I being that young, I wasn't too good at maths, I suppose, and I didn't care less anyway. But I was told later on that something like 160 people applied. Yeah, right. And they did go around and did the selection board, and about something in the order of about 86 people started actually. Now this is really interesting to me because I never saw 80 in my mind. I never saw 86 guys standing there. There were a lot. I thought it was about 60 or something, but I didn't care about counting. And I think something in the order of about 20 finished.
Wow.
And 6 of us passed.
High attrition rate.
Yeah. These days it's sort of similar. It's still similar. And the system then was, if you got through the Carter, as they called it then, the Carter course selection, which in our day was like, I think probably about 5.5 weeks long. It was longer. Yeah, right. Longer than the one first selection. Yeah, right. So there's a bit more in it. And then after that, then you go and do your para course. And then after that, if you pass those 2 things, then you got your beret then. Yeah, right. And then you went to a squadron, and all the reinforcement cycle that they go through now was done on the job in the squadron that you were going to Vietnam with, basically. Yeah, right. So there's a different system, but it was sort of the same, but the time
broken up a bit. Yeah,
time and things were different.
And talk me through your para course, because I know some people. You talk to some veterans, they absolutely hate it. And was that just another? I'm living a Huckleberry Finn. I'm doing this again.
No, well, I think I think basically it's probably a bit scary for most people because you're jumping out at height. You
perfectly good plane too.
Yeah, that's right. You think well, this is a crazy thing to do, but it was part of the course. If you couldn't do that, you're not going anywhere. You know, so it was you just got stuck into it. And it's one of those things. Well, I think I might be afraid of heights or something. And in the end, they chuck you out anyway. So bad luck. And in a way, and so you might as well enjoy it. So that's the way I sort of work.
Yeah, right.
And so I got into it with a vengeance. So it was an arduous course. It was hard on the body from memory. The harness used to cut you in half and all that sort of thing, doing all these forever drills and everything. But the drills that I learned there for sure saved me later on in a big entanglement in Perth, on a tactical jump.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think it was quite arduous, but I really loved it. To me this was great. And anything that's difficult I get stuck into. Got the airborne turned up. So one thing it did they've got the Polish tower where you hook on, and you swing down under there, and you do a landing down a long cable, and it's fairly high above the ground. It's probably about 40, 50 metres above the ground or more. I don't know. It's pretty high. And we were lined up there to go off, and there was Lindsay Hanch, who turned out as an officer going to SAS, and there was him, and then there was a little Italian bloke from Melbourne, infantry guy, or he might have been an ordnance guy or something. For some reason he was doing a para course. And then there was me, hooked on, waiting to go. And Lindsay Hanch went down there and broke his leg in 3 places or something, and we all looked over the top of the parapet, and there was Lindsay's on the ground, and his foot was pointing the other way and all this sort of stuff. And this little bloke in front of me, the old Mario, he said, "No, that's it, unhook, I'm out of here," And they said, "Right, next," and I went off, didn't have a problem. But I always remember that.
Yeah, I know there's a few people that I've spoken to that have said, that bloke sputtered in, and one actually got so severely injured from para that actually ended his career. It's a dangerous, and people don't realise that it's what you're doing, like, as you know, because you spent over 20 years in the regiment, and
in the
army, and majority of that in the SAS, and you look at, like, as you said to me, off air before we started, that more people have died in training accidents than actually on deployment. Yeah,
well, it's it's like if you want to play easy, you got to train hard, and you got to train very realistically, and that's always been the ethos of the regiment and typical special force units. And so that's why in history they've been able to pull off some awesome things and make it to an outsider who doesn't understand all that tough preparation.
That's right.
Make it look easy almost, But the para course was good, and so therefore, I got my beret.
What was that like?
And I was, in fact, by the time I was 18 and a half, I'd been badged with my beret, and I'd also was a patrol medic. I'd done the patrol medic course at Hillsville as well.
Yeah, right.
So there's a photograph in my book with me standing there, resplendent in my walkout dress with my beret on, like I look like a kid in grade 2 or something.
Right.
But and I was already a patrol medic and so on. So then I went. Once I'd done that, I went into a 1 squadron. 2 squadron, because 2 squadron was a squadron preparing for war. That year. Yeah.
So, and with that that there's a big now that. There's a big beret, like you get presented a presentation now.
Yeah.
Like, you have accomplished something that few before you have and few after. Do you look at, like, now on reflection, as you're looking later on in your life and go, wow, like I actually, like, this is a special, like, do you look at that beret now? Like,
no, I'm obviously proud of being an SAS soldier. But I don't, not too proud, it's just what I did. I don't sort of say, wow, I was one of there was probably, in the regiment at that age, there were others. I was one of a very few people at that age to go in.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the average age in the squadron then was probably, the average age of the troopers at least anyway, well, would have been, in their sort of, 19, 20, 21, 22 sort of.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they're all about 2 or 3 years older than me.
Yep.
The vast majority. So when I went into when I when I went back from the Paracross, I was the youngest guy in the regiment there for a few weeks until one of the transport blokes turned up and he was younger than me. Sort of thing. But he wasn't in the Sabre squadron. But I was always the youngest guy in my squadron, and certainly as a shooter,
Yeah, right. So you post into 2 Squadron after you're trained, and you become a patrol scout and a medic.
Yeah,
talk me through your Rio.
Well, so the probably the big course, and for most people then, was the patrol course, right? So this is where you learn to patrol properly, which is the bread and butter, of the Vietnam days, and it still is a big thing today. It's the bread and butter really. How to be close in with the enemy, close quarters in a sense, and we were setting up for jungle warfare, which is very, very close. It's quite different from the desert or something which is a lot longer range. You've got different weaponry and so on. But in the jungle, it's like 3 seconds away is something different.
Yeah.
It could be all over Rover, and you would never schmick about it unless you're really good. So that's how everyone trained in those days, because we were setting up for that particular campaign, that particular war, and that particular geography, topography. And so we had the patrol course, which was the big school really for the squadron, and also the patrol commanders, the patrol leaders were also being trained in that patrol course to lead.
Yeah, right.
And tactical leaders. And in the troop in those days, you had 5 patrols of 5 men each, so 25 fully manned, with a second lieutenant or maybe a lieutenant as the troop commander, and you had a senior sergeant as the troop sergeant, and each of those 2 gentlemen have their own patrol, and you had 3 other sergeants with their patrol. In some parts, especially going towards Vietnam, some of the patrol commanders were corporals, just a small handful. And they were getting ready to be sergeant. They still got to do their promotion courses and stuff like that. So I was in the patrol, the troop commander's patrol. So we then you do other things. Some people do courses. Other people doing medic courses, SIG courses, all the patrol skills sort of courses. And I was a medic, so So by the time we started the biggie, which is like 2 months. Pre-Vietnam warfare training in Papua New Guinea, which is a terrific thing. I was a patrol scout there, and second medic type of thing in the patrol. So I did a bit of medical work, and I did a lot of scouting work, and that was really, really interesting for me, because this is the first time you see people under pressure, really, and you see how the squadron operates really as a squadron away, doing their stuff, and so it was pretty fascinating and good stuff. And hard yards there,
Oh, definitely.
And it was a tremendous preparation. The companies and the battalions, they go to, the Kananga and Land Warfare Centre and those sort of places. But the SAS squadron all went to Papua New Guinea for that 2 months.
So your Rio cycle back then, talk me through. Was it as intensive as it is now, or like?
Well, I think so. It was. You're flat out really, and when you're not doing a course for your patrol skill or whatever, you're getting involved in squadron exercises. So we did a lot of those as well, and various levels and so on. Troop size, squadron size, but mainly it was the squadron operating together. And I was mentioning entanglement before. We did a big tactical exercise down in the southern part of Western Australia there, in the middle of winter. I remember it was a dawn jump, and for some reason they wanted the whole squadron to jump in together. So we had 2 Hercs, one behind the other, full of people, 60 men in each Herc sort of thing, jumping out, double door exit in those days, and it was supposed to be a dawn jump, and So we were up there in the middle of the bloody night, cruising around, waiting for dawn to come up, and there was some problem in the other aircraft or something. So we actually, when we jumped out, it was just starting to be light, and out of that 2 Hercs worth of guys jumping, so you had 2 layers of parachutists coming down, one over the top, because they dropped them at the same place, and out of that we had 6 men entangled. out of that, and I was one of the six entangled with a guy in 2 squadron called Darren, and he jumped out, but basically he landed on my chute, and I took his wind away. My chute took his wind away, and his chute collapsed, and he landed on my chute. And I was looking up, and I see these 2 big pair of size 9 boots imprinting on my chute. And in the paracourse they say pull away, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there was a pull away and a few more other words spoken around about that time.
Yeah. Understandable.
And so then he slid down, and his boots slid down through my rigging lines then, because my chute started collapsing when he came through it.
Mm.
And he came down, and I was looking up, and his big size 9s hit me fair in the smush, in his face. And I grabbed hold of him, because that's the drill, I grabbed hold of his feet, whether he kicked me or not, and basically hoped for the best for a few seconds, see what happened. And my chute nearly collapsed fully, but it was fluffing a bit, and his was fluffing a bit. And then I really pulled hard and pulled him down, so my head was about his sort of sternum level.
Yep.
And then my chute just started billowing up, and we had enough. We were they weren't 2 full chutes, but we were coming down. We managed to get down, and I always remember this. I said, "Oh, how are you going, mate?" And he said, "Oh, not bad, mate. How are you going?" So it was very calm, right?
Yep.
It was really interesting. So we just doing as we trained. So. Yeah, so everyone walked away without any injuries, but it was...
Hairy moment.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it?
But you know what highlights
I was
there
never
is...
worried about it, so...
You know what highlights to me there is you remain calm. Under pressure,
absolutely.
You remain calm. And what that shows to me is the training that you were getting in the regiment was you don't need to be running around like, just remain calm. It's all good. We'll work this out.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially in a group where you might be you're well behind the enemy lines. You got 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people or something like that. You cannot afford to be anything but calm courage, basically.
Yeah.
And they don't say, right, we're going to teach you about calmness. No, but they just train you, and guys are professional. They get stuck into it, and it's just a privilege to serve with men like that.
Yeah, and when you're preparing to go to Vietnam, when you're in your squadron, had some of the guys already that were in your squadron, had they deployed already to Vietnam?
Yeah, so this is 2 squadrons' second tour to Vietnam, right?
Yeah, right.
So all the NCOs, just about all the NCOs, had been there as troopers or corporals or something, and now they were sergeant patrol commanders and things. So that's some of the depth and the wealth of experience in the SAS squadrons, and that's why we had an incredible record in Vietnam over 6 years of flat out patrolling and combat.
Well, that's why you're called the Phantoms of the Jungle, mate.
Yeah, well, everyone's just doing their job. We weren't big noting ourselves in terms of we're this or that. No one thought like that ever.
So is this the time when you're with Graham Brenner and Hans Flair?
I was really, really lucky. No criticism of my troop commander, because I was in his patrol.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, from a trooper's point of view, no one wants to be in the boss's patrol, because he's the least experienced of all the patrol commanders in a sense. You know? Which is just the way it works. The officers come and go, every couple of years, sort of thing. And it's probably different now. I don't know, but so the other patrol commanders were all experienced sergeants. They'd done the full tour before. We're talking 12-month tours here, So they're very experienced. And in my patrol, normally they give the very experienced corporal the job to be the 2IC to the officer, the patrol commander. For obvious reasons.
Yeah, yep.
And I think so. Raz, who taught me to patrol, he was one of the guys I gave accolades to when I left the sergeant's mess. Eventually, he was my patrol 2IC, so he taught me how to patrol. And we didn't get on too well because I was a teenage gunslinger bongo player, and he Like he was in 6th Battalion when Long Tan was on, and he did that, and now he's going on his 3rd tour. You know, I mean, he's a very experienced guy, terrific guy, but a very got to do this young fella and got to do that young fella, and so we had a parting of ways like a divorce at the end of Papua New Guinea, and to me on one side I'm thinking, oh, this is terrific, I'm no longer going to be in the boss's patrol. But of course the tension is, well, where am I going to end up? And at the end of because what they're trying to do is not just on paper, but you've got to get on with your patrol mates and things like that. And so they go out of their way to make sure there's a good mix and match with members in the patrols, so they can fight together properly. And so the rejects like me, get kicked. There's like half a dozen guys that, for whatever reason, they've got to move patrol or something. So they have what they call a lucky dip at the end of... Remember the old football days? Yeah. And they say, I'll pick him, you can be on my team and you can be on my team. So the patrol commanders are still looking for a couple of guys or whatever. They'd line up on one side and the rejects on the other, and they'd look at you and say, oh, yeah, I'll pick him, I need a medic, or I'll pick him, I need a SIG, or, whatever. And so... And Graham Brammer was there, and he was a corporal, he was like the junior patrol commander in the squadron at that time, and he was just about to be promoted sergeant, and he picked me. So that's the most brilliant thing that ever happened to me. It's a highlight of my military career, being picked by Graham as his scout. He needed a scout, and I was a scout, and I'll pick him, and I'll give him a go. And as it turned out, we served the whole time together. He defended me like mad because he's happy with my service and everything. And the old troop commander, the old Frank, he always trying to get rid of me and all that sort of stuff, because I was terrible out. I was terrible back in the field. Well, I was good in the field. I love the operations. I love the combat. I love the operations, but I wasn't really sharp in the base. I didn't like rules and regulations and. Putting up with this army stuff.
You weren't a barrack soldier. No, you weren't a barrack soldier.
So I was always playing up a bit and stuff. So the old troop commander says, we'll have to send you down the hill and wear one of those big brown hats, and you'd be a forward scout for the battalion doing 18 clicks a day or something. That was our big threat, against us. But so Graham used to defend me, and it got so bad there a couple of times. I'd be walking around seeing the other patrol commander saying, look, I've got a break between patrols. Can I go out with you? You need an extra bloke, So I love the bush and I love the operations.
Yeah. And so is that where you cross paths with Hans as well?
Yeah. Well, Hans was also picked up after Papua New Guinea. He came into the squadron there, and he was a corporal, and he was our 2IC, Hans Fleer, DCM. Brilliant guy, very... very taciturn sort of a character, but we all got on really well. We're quite a good mix, and we inherited Snow Lawrence, who was a great SIG. He was actually a national serviceman, one of the nashos we had in the 2 squadron at that time. They were great soldiers. The vast majority were really tremendous, and he was a really good, accomplished guy. He was in Ronnie Gilchrist's patrol, so Ron was a great patrol commander. And we inherited Snow as our SIG, and Hartley Smithwick was our demolition medic man, and he was great too. So we had a really good patrol, and Graham ran it like he'd been he was a scout actually in his first tour in 68 with 2 squadron and a patrol member and stuff like that, and he had some really good patrol commanders, Johnny Coleman and all that sort of stuff. So I was really fortunate to be in that patrol, and but I had to dodge the troop sergeant every now and then and stuff like that.
So with like Hans, had he already been awarded his DCM for that? Yeah. So, and was that that was in his previous?
Yeah, tour? in the battalion, 6th battalion.
Yeah,
actually,
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, he was awarded that, and for meritorious action. DCM won under the VC, right?
Yeah.
In those days, and also in F Troop, which we're in 2-3 patrol in F Troop, and also Dave Shields was a DCM winner in F Troop. So we had 2 DCM winners in F Troop.
Yeah, right.
And Frank Cashmore was the patrol commander who'd run the the now famous tractor job in '68, and even the MID, and so there was a lot of decorated guys in 2 Squadron. There was a very good squadron. Yeah.
So this lucky dip for you turned out to be an absolute blessing.
Fortunate.
Fortunate.
Well, I found in my life that one door closes could be seemingly bad, but there's always another door that opens. As long as your mind is open to the opportunity, you're always looking forward, right? A lot of people's doors open, but they never step in. Right?
They never take that opportunity.
Yeah, so a lot of things happen in life, but as I've talked about before, it's not what happens in life that matters. It's what you do about what happens that matters, right?
Exactly.
That's the mark of you, really.
Exactly, and for you, mate. So you finish your Rio, you are preparing to deploy to Vietnam, and then you finally get there. And talk me through that, mate, because you were thinking, back in 69 when you joined up, this war's gonna end. Yeah. You're finally over in Vietnam, and what were you doing over there? What was your role?
Well, just a quick step backwards.
Sure.
Initially, I was getting close to Christmas in '69. They asked for reinforcements to go up. Usually there's a few people that are finishing up or something a bit early, so they need reinforcements from the regiment to go up and take up residence there. So 1 squadron needed some reinforcements, so they were already up there. So I put my hand up, of course, right, being a teenage gunslinger. I said, yeah, pick me. So they said, okay. So off they did, and I went on pre-embarkation leave over to Adelaide, and I was sitting in the barber's chair getting the combat crew cut, ready to deploy, back to the regiment and then go up as a Rio. And then Dad come running in with this telegram in those days. He said, you've got to report back to the regiment. Your pre-embarkation leave's finished. They've found out you're too young. You're not allowed to go to Vietnam yet. So they found out the old clerk read the thing. Hang on, this bloke's not 19 yet.
Right.
Because he had to be in Australia. You had to be 19 to go to combat zone. And so, Jesus. So I went back. Spent Christmas there at the regiment, and then I went up with the squadron, in early February or whenever it was, So I nearly got there I nearly broke the rule, which I love, So they nearly got me.
Yeah, nearly, and then so you finally deploy at 19, and talk me through Vietnam, mate, and your experiences and. Talk me through the first time you went outside the wire and then you're in contact for the first time. What was that like?
Yeah. Well, so, again, when we landed in Ton Son Nhut, in Saigon there, now Ho Chi Minh City, it was fascinating because that was like one of the biggest air bases in the world at that time. They had hundreds of thousands of people there. And jet fighters and choppers and people walking around. Everyone was walking around with a gun, and it was a completely. What sort of culture is this? It takes you about an hour to sort of absorb it, and you think, Christ, we're actually at war. There's a war zone here, because up till now, in Australia, it's all walk around. You can't have live rounds and all that sort of stuff in most military units. Anyway, so that was something, and then we flew by C-123, which is like I call them baby Hercs. I can't remember their nomenclature, but the American Airlines, they said, "Welcome to Air Vietnam," and it's like straight out of the movies or something. Landed in Nui Dat and into the Australian base there at Luscombe Field, and then we went up there. So. Then we had some big demos of firepower demos. 3 battalion infantry were there at the time, I think, from memory. Maybe 7 or 2 or something was nearly going back or something. There was about 2 or 3 battalions there in deployment. We went, and 3 battalion had more or less just got up there too. So we went to a big firepower demonstration with them, and we did a lot of in-country sort of prep training with IEDs and booby traps, and the engineers sort of ran us through a lot of stuff and so on. We did a lot of drills and training down the range, and really perfected our get into the contact drills and all that stuff. So we really honed our skills. Did a couple of small inner patrols not far from the task force, just warm-ups, And then the first patrol we did, I remember, was actually, and it was the only one I think I ever did with went in on tracks. So we flew into we went by vehicle down to a fire support base or something, somehow nearby the task force. And then we jumped on these tracks from 2cab or whatever it was, the 113s. And we went out there with a bit of a deception plan. We sat on the top in normal greens, and a couple of other blokes were down below, a few other blokes down below, sweating away in the box. And we went out there on top, just in greens, past this village, that village, went out, I think it was a Swan Mock area or somewhere like that. And then we pulled off into the bush near our AO, and we climbed down and changed into our camis and put our cam cream on and did all that. And the other guys got up on top in their greens, and then they trundled back to, through the same direction. And we wandered off into the weeds, as a deception plan,
Yeah, right.
So that was the first patrol, I remember. From memory, I don't think we saw much on that first patrol. We didn't have too much sign or whatever. So it was uneventful in that respect. But, of course, I mean, as I know this, even if you don't see anyone, it's still very extremely tense, because you could see someone 5 seconds later, right? And so you can't drop your guard for the whole time you're out there. And so there's a lot of pressure, and indeed our role mainly was not be seen, and not have firefights. By and large, in the reconnaissance mode anyway. And then later on you often depends on the task force commanders how they wanted. Other squadrons had a lot more offensive operations in their thing. We had some. A lot of our patrols were reconnaissance and then opportunity targets in the last couple of days, depending on what we've seen and so on. So we did a lot of patrols. The 2 squadron boys reckon they shot all the enemy out before 3 squadron got there, in '68. And the 69 boys, 3 squadron, they say, "Oh, there's nothing left for you to find, mate. We've shot them all out." Not the 3 squadron, the 2 squadron. Yeah. So 2 squadron gave the 3 squadron, then 3 squadron changed over to 1 squadron. So by the time we got there, and we met a lot of these guys on the Tonsanute, and they were leaving. We just got there.
Yeah.
And I remember someone set off a laughing box, one of those little laughing boxes somewhere, and they were, you'll be sorry, mate, the old army stuff.
Yeah.
Even in SAS they did that. It was funny. But they reckon, oh no, there's no one left for you, mate. We've done them all over. But we did quite a bit of a lot of patrolling, and you had to be good on every patrol, otherwise, And so we had a couple of guys wounded and things like that, but generally everything worked out. One of the big highlights was in those days we were doing exchanges with the SEAL Team 1, and our patrol went down and exchanged with down on exchange. Did a couple of weeks down at in the Mekong Delta with November Platoon, and that was Roger Hayden's outfit. He was a chief down there. He's a famous legend in the SEAL teams. And so I did about 4 operations with the SEAL teams, which was really interesting. And they're raiders, right? So you go out for 2 or 3 hours and then back on the Budweiser,
Yeah, right.
So go in, shoot up some dudes. If you survive that, you're back on the piss in the bar, So that was a close one, sort of this.
Yeah, right.
So I did 4 operations with them. That was really interesting for me, and. So yeah, it's and we were there for a total of actually around about 8 months, 8.5 months or something like that, which is a long tour when you're doing a lot of patrols. And it's interesting, when you look to the guys doing so many deployments to Afghanistan, and a lot of them were a few months and so on, difficult times. But in 6 months, around about 6 months mark doing jungle patrolling, pretty intensive work. A lot of guys were starting to get a bit ratty around about the 6 months. But in my case, I loved it, right? So I was a bit of a pest, really. So I'm right into scouting. I love being a scout. If I was really busted up and feeling pretty tired. Graham said, "Oh, you need a rest," and Harley take over for a while. And I hate that, Oh, no, hang on, hold the phone, This is this 180 degrees in front of me. This is my zone,
Yeah.
But you got to do what you can. But I loved operations, and so when they decided that the tanks and the SAS were going to finish early, what I'd call early. So gradually they brought the perimeter of the task force into the operational zone in. They brought them in early. So the tanks were obviously heavy duty stuff, and they weren't as needed now for the big contacts and so on. And SAS, we were working well, sometimes out of the province and so on like that, long distances, so we weren't needed as such. So that's why the SAS and the tanks actually went home a bit earlier than the rest of the task force. And I got to say, I was a bit annoyed by that. I thought, it's still going on here, Jack. We've still got some work to do here.
Yep.
But a lot of guys were pretty happy to go home, and a lot of the guys were on their second tour, and so they were pretty happy to go home.
Of course,
and so on. So it can be quite wearing, even though you're not having big contacts all the time or something like that. But just doing that job, it's particularly tense.
And for you, what was it like? All this training that you'd had, the first time you did get in contact. Was it just back to muscle memory, drills, training kicked in? Yeah,
pretty much. I mean, we had the one that I remember particularly was, I had some incidents with the SEALs, but the one I remember particularly was a five of us. We just about stepped on them actually. Some guys building a bunker system. Some enemy, and we nearly stepped on. I won't tell the full story, but it was interesting because we didn't normally patrol in the rain, our patrol, very much because, if the other guys are sitting there, the opposition's sitting there, they're looking and watching and listening. You can't hear much when the rain's coming down because it's pretty heavy there typically. But we were patrolling in the morning in the rain a bit because we weren't ready to stop or something, whatever the story was. I was scouting them, and finally Graham said, "Oh, righto, just pull up there, LUP there." And I come up against this big log, and so it was a good sort of a, period, good place to stop. So I just pulled off my pack and took up position there. And just as we stopped there and got in there all round there, the Vietnamese voices arced up about 25 metres away, really loud.
Yeah, right.
Over the other side of this log, right? It was pretty dense jungle there, vines and what have you, and about two or three voices arced up and turned the old Vietnamese radio on with the Vietnamese music, and holy moly, we were right on them.
Yeah.
And they didn't see us because we were extremely quiet. So we just stood there, and it was one of the great times you see raw leadership in action with Graham Brammer there. So we were ready to rock and roll, and Graham just, put his rifle on his boot and took out a water bottle and had a bit of a drink, But that was really calming because we were right at just about going to contract drill. And he said, "Oh, I think we'll just get out of here now," sort of thing, really whisper. So he said, "Young bloke, Bob, get the pack on and backtrack out." So I scouted back out, and then we went and LEP'd about another 50 metres away and put in a sked, comms, and said back to squadron what we'd found and so on. And actually we stayed there that night.
Yeah, right.
About 75 metres off this bunker system. I think it's probably about 70 metres or 75, because they were very close to this log,
Yep.
And and they were cutting wood each side of us, and so it was an interesting time, right? And anyway, that scared Graham said, "Oh, we found, 5, maybe 4 or 5 or half a dozen people digging bunkers and building a bunker system," and the word came back from squadron, from the OC. That's fine. The attack when ready. It was the most bizarre message I think anyone's ever received.
Yeah, right.
So that was what. And then the next day we boxed all around and did a close recce of everything and brought in a standby patrol. So 10 of us did a noisy attack on this bunker system.
Yeah, right.
Which was pretty interesting.
Absolutely.
But anyway, so when it all arced up, we were very close. So we were probably about only about 15, 20 metres from bunker system when they opened up on us with a long burst of RPD against snow on the left flank there. And I was sort of next to him about, probably 5 metres away from him, something like that, roughly. And they aimed at him, and he's the luckiest man alive. I talked to him in the boozer later on, back on the hill, and I said, what was the story when they opened up? And he said, yeah, well, I jumped up. And I was sort of like spread eagle, and I could see all these rounds hitting the ground. I said, what did you think? He said, I was trying to fly, man. I was trying to fly. I didn't want to land,
Yeah.
So he's very lucky Snow, but he's a great soldier. And anyway, and I remember Graham yelling out and all the cacophony of noise and sound because we're firing bunkers and things like that, really close. And Graham says, Snow, what do you got, Snow? And he said, oh, I don't know, but he's got black hair and slanty eyes, he says, so funny, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And later on when we had to withdraw, we had a man wounded with grenade shrapnel and things like that, and we were lucky to get out of there, really. But anyway, so when we had to withdraw, Graham, said to me, he said, go out there, and I couldn't. I looked over on the right and I couldn't see hands. I yelled out, hands, where are your hands? At the top of my voice because there's bombs going off and all sorts of shit going off. And you couldn't see much. We had gas in the area which we pumped in just to mark it as well because we ran out of smoke and that. And we had gunships going off and the whole shooting match. Anyway, so I yelled out, hands, where are you, hands? He says, I'm in the next bloody grid square. Unbelievable, right? Unbelievable.
Yeah, right.
It's just a Aussie humour,
Yep.
Those things will last with you for the rest of your life.
100%.
But, it's a funny story.
So that happens, mate. You drills, you go through your drills.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that, Graham, you talk about Graham with calmness and you talk about the parachute. Were you thinking back on it now, were you calm as well in just doing your drills?
Yeah. So I think, that's, and everyone was, right, as far as I could see. I mean, some people obviously more nervous than others or whatever. But certainly in our patrol, they were tremendous patrol, and great leadership and, and hands and Graham are steady as rocks, And so that's really important, when you got junior guys coming in for that, So there's an old saying which I use a lot, fear is contagious, right? But so is courage.
Yeah, definitely. Never a truer word spoken.
So leadership is so important, and one of my keynotes is leadership under pressure, and not just patrol level, but right up to the biggies. You can take even Eisenhower in D-Day. You know what I mean.
That's right.
So there's a lot of things that can be taken though in the same sort of thing. It's just a different scale. That's all. So that's why I'm saying I was very, very privileged to operate with the guys in that patrol. And it's been a love story for 50 years with the men there in that patrol.
What's a bond that
unfortunately Hans has passed on now.
Yeah.
But we thought he'd be the last one to go, but it's just so close. And the guys that have gone and followed our footsteps and before us, they've all had the same bonding. When you fight together, it's such a bonding.
100%.
But the training is, you mentioned before, it's not just the combat. It's all those hard yards of the training and you've got to have a large dose of camaraderie. Because you got each other's back, and the thing is, for people to understand, when you go out in the field in SAS terms, you're always outnumbered.
Yeah.
You're 4 or 5 people, or maybe 6 or something, maybe. Sometimes you join and have 2 patrols together, you're like a 10-manner or something like that. If you're going to hit a hard target, so you have two M60 machine guns and everyone's on order, if someone hit that, they think they've hit an infantry company or something. You're always outnumbered. So you have to be a certain type of personality, I think, to do that. Commandos, on the other hand, are a little bit different in that respect. They need a different personality because they're lots of people, relatively speaking. They're loaded for bear, kill a lot of dudes, shock action, stuff like that. they generally tend to not be out that long, whereas long-range reconnaissance and all those sort of things, you can be out a long time. You know, most of our patrols, probably I would say a good 50% of them, this is very, vague memory stuff, but 50% of our patrols, we were extended.
Yeah,
so you're out there for a week and they say, we want to ready for extraction. And they said, no, you've got another 3 days. We stay out there. We want you to do this or that or this or that. So because you're already there, and they don't want to put another patrol in because the enemy find out.
That's right. And with that, do you
get hungry? You get a bit hungry.
Well, I had Gary Mackay on, and Gary Mackay MC, and he served over there, and he spoke of that if you had a contact, you got that's what he did, and you can tell me this. Yeah. They would eat. So if they had a contact, they'd eat cold. Yeah. If they didn't have a contact, that's when they'd eat. They'd have a hot meal. Is similar to you. Same thing. If you guys would do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, the infantry companies used to primarily, it seemed, work as companies, and then they offshoot their platoons and sections sometimes on patrols, and various battalions used to work differently. And I was never in a battalion, right?
No, you.
Unlike most guys who came into SAS, I came from battalion sort of push. So everyone had different aspects. It's my understanding that Gary Mackay was a good battalion commander. I've got his book at home, and he was a good read, and he was a professional guy.
And I want to talk before we wrap up Vietnam and then go on with the rest of your career. I want to talk about an incident where you almost stepped on a 500-pound bomb, and talk me through this.
Oh well, this is a scouting story, I suppose. So the rule in our patrol, anyway. Different patrols even had different procedures and so on. But the rule in our patrol was that it was never pointed out to me in a sense. This became the procedure. Once I said, there's a procedure. Okay. I was sort of just, to me, everything in front of me at 180 degrees was the bad guys, which was just fine by me. I didn't mind that. That was all right. I revelled in it in a sense. But anyway, we were wandering along through the woods there one day, and I went past there, and Graham went, a little click or a little whistle or something, and I turned around, and he said, he's just looking at me, and he's just pointing down to the ground. Well, I just stepped past, and there's a 500-pounder lying there in the bush, right? Like a dud, whatever. And I looked down and went, oh, Jesus. I remember, well, I didn't say that, but, I didn't jump up in the air or anything, but I thought, I should have seen that, right? So from then on, I knew that I had to look at the ground as well as looking for humans out here. Yeah. And I'd been surprised by a couple of big iguana lizards and things leaping out, and I nearly shot them and things like that in front of me. Because you're dealing with wildlife and all of those sort of things. Probably one of the scariest things that happened to me in Vietnam was I remember we were up near the Maytaus in long grass, and Maytaus was, you always put a couple of extra mags in going to the Maytaus because it was a long way. If you got in a hurt there and sent out the code word for rapid extraction, it was something like an hour or something from memory that you'd had to wait for the choppers to get there. That's a lot of running, right? Yeah. When you're being chased or whatever. So you used to put in extra mags when you're going up that far. I remember patrolling along, and all of a sudden I came around through the grass there, and all of a sudden there was this sort of trampled area, and there was this great big pile of steaming elephant dung in front of me. And I went, uh-oh, and immediately the stories of Borneo came back to me, where our guy was killed by the elephant.
Yeah. I think Dan spoke about that.
Yeah, gored by the elephant, like it was a famous story in the regiment. And I thought, uh-oh, because the elephants are smart, right? And you think, where is the elephant, So I thought, and I looked at my gun, the bitch, as I called it, as it was called, and I thought, okay, I'm going to give it the full 30 rounds right through between the looking gear if it comes at me, whatever it is, you know. I remember thinking that, and I thought, man, this is scary stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I turned around to Graham and went, oh, look, you know. He said, oh, you know, his eyes widened a little bit, and we took a different track.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so, I mean, it sounds a bit of a funny thing, but
it's scary.
But, you know, and there was, I believe there were other patrols who ran into tiger tracks and things, you know, so you got to contend with snakes and all sorts of things, all sorts of bodies up there.
Well, the jungle, mate.
We were nice and comfortable in the jungle. The Australians at large were good in the jungle, you know. And I think because we were pretty comfortable with it.
Well, I know I've spoken to a lot of veterans that have gone to Butterworth and they've gone in the jungle and they said, oh, God, we take our hats off to the Vietnam veterans and the World War II vets because they said everything in the jungle's trying to kill you. So,
I mean, we're used to that from Papua New Guinea because everything is bigger and bodier up there.
That's right,
generally speaking. So, but it is what it is, and let's continue.
So you had guys wounded, and did you have on your 8-month tour that was cut short? And as you said, you spoke in the podcast that you were cheesed off, that it was cut short. Did you lose anyone on that trip?
No. Well, we had a couple of guys medevac for injuries and things like that, and one guy on that bunker attack that I told you about, he was wounded by grenade shrapnel and things like that. Interestingly enough, in that standby patrol that came in was Clive Mason, who was an ex-Royal Marine.
Who
served with us in 2 Squadron. He's pretty amazing character, Clive. And after the Vietnam War, he was one of the guys that went over to fight in the bush wars with the Rhodesian SAS, and also and he was killed with the Selous Scouts actually in a big raid into Mozambique.
Yeah, okay.
So and he was on that bunker attack. You know.
So you mentioned, and before I'll move off Vietnam in a minute, you mentioned you worked with the US guys, the SEAL team. Yeah. Was that good working with other special forces from around the world?
It was good. We got on really well with the SEALs, right? Yeah. It was funny when they went out with us though, because it was like terminal camping or something for them. They didn't camp much, so they were raiders,
Yeah.
And, they were speed and velocity and high firepower and all that sort of stuff. Whereas we were just moseying around the bush for a long time, not being seen, and phantoms of the jungle
Patient, quiet. Yeah.
And that was quite a revelation to those guys. But working with them was really interesting. I think, I certainly loved them, and most of our guys liked them because they were warmongers like us. They were warriors.
Yeah.
In those days, you could say that word.
Yeah, warrior culture. Yeah, can't say that these days.
A bit of rubbish.
Times have changed.
Yes, just rubbish.
As you said, mate, you're serving in the pinnacle of Australian Special Forces. What are you there to do? You're there. You're warriors, mate. You're there to
of course you're a warrior.
Do your job.
In fact, if you don't have warriors, they can't do that job.
Exactly.
And I'll stand on any soapbox today and say that.
Yeah.
And the people who don't want that to happen are people who are bureaucratic soldiers.
Yep.
Whatever their rank.
Well said, mate. Well said.
My dad used to say of people that worked in an office a lot, he called them shiny bums. They had the old polyester pants and the shiny bums sitting in office. So there was a lot of shiny bums in senior ranks. And it's not their fault in a sense because they clawed their way to the top in peacetime, of course. So there was a long time where there wasn't operations, but you can't expect people to go around acting as an offensive force, even defensive force. Without, if there's lives at stake, there's got to be warriors. They're the ones that come to the fore.
Yeah.
And if you say, well, you can't call yourself a warrior, it's just a joke, really.
Exactly.
It's just dumb.
It is, mate. It's and you and I have spoken off air, and I know I encourage every civilian listener that listens to this. Go and watch, recently with what's happened in Afghanistan go and watch Bravery and Betrayal and see, it's a phenomenal documentary that shows exactly the courage and the warrior, the warriors that went away and did.
It's
what
a great
they did.
doco, yeah.
It is. It's fantastic.
And it's said with a lot of truth, clarity, and honesty. You know. You know, but this is not a new thing. It's been going back thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
They probably used to shit can the centurions coming back from the Gauls.
Yeah,
Or
of course.
Say, oh, you blokes, your swords are a bit sharp, you know.
Yeah, of course.
You
no,
know,
it's
just rubbish. Really.
It is, isn't it? And you know and I put this question to both Burnsy and also Ian Langford.
Yeah.
And they said, what is the army's main role? It's to kill people. That's the job of an infantryman is to kill people. That's what you're trained to do. You're trained to go to war and kill people. And I hate to break that down to people that don't, if you find that, shocking, well, that's
well, I'll give you a couple of quotes here. You know, MRD Foote, who was in SOE and in fact MI9, the escape lines and so on, in World War II, SOE, and he wrote the official history of SOE as well, and it's a great read. What is the point of following rules in wartime? Snap.
Yeah.
Boom, boom.
Yeah.
And the other one I'll say is, 500 years BC was Sun Tzu, and he said, all warfare is deception. That's it. So people who don't go to war don't know anything about it and don't care about it mostly, actually. I mean, I don't know. There's probably Vietnam War is a long time ago, right? I usually say once upon a time in a faraway land.
Yeah.
People can't even spell Vietnam these days.
Yeah.
And most Vietnam veterans are dying off now.
Yeah.
So being the youngest in the cohort,
well,
I could be the last man standing.
As I've said to you,
I was 74 yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday, mate! Happy birthday!
And on the 26th.
Yeah, and I say, as I said to you, mate, at the start of the podcast, you're the third Vietnam veteran I've had on the podcast, and I've been going for nearly 6 years. Yeah. It is very, very hard to get Vietnam veterans to come on the podcast. So
but there's still a lot around, but they're starting to fall off the perch now. That's for sure.
So you finish your time. So you finish your deployment.
Yeah.
Rewarding, and was it everything you thought it would be when you got to the regiment and you wanted, back in the 69 when I've got to get to this war? Was it everything you thought and more?
Well, it's probably a misplaced question if I can say that.
Of course,
because I didn't know what it was going to be like.
Yeah.
I just move forward. Right? I move forward. It's I'm constantly moving forward, and I think that the training is very important. In fact, in my keynote, Leadership Under Pressure was one of my keynotes, and what I mentioned there is one of the things you've got to have is preparation, right? If you're fully prepared, you're not surprised.
Yeah.
Well, so it doesn't matter what happens. What's
the old saying? Piss poor preparations right. equals piss poor performance.
Yeah. So, but if you I spent quite a good number of years with Jim Truscott in the crisis management, emergency management practitioner, and some of the biggest business teams in the world, and in Australia as well. And we used to think up all sorts of scenarios for them to keep them awake at night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if you've contemplated everything, if you can contemplate everything that could happen, might happen, then you're not surprised when it does happen. So you're in a position where you can array your courage and you can array your calmness. The only time you're not calm is when you're surprised, right?
True.
That's what we're trying to do to the other guy, right?
Yeah.
By turning up when he doesn't expect, right?
That's right.
So if you're constantly training hard, and just call it preparation as a generic, whatever field you're in, whether you're a football player or whether you train hard, play easy. End of story, right?
Yeah.
And if suddenly, one of my things that I say is, sport, business, and warfare are all the same activities. It's just the stakes are different, right? They're actually very, very similar in just about everything. So, take football. If you turn up and the team comes out, that you're up against with a different tactic you've never seen before, you're going to be surprised. You're going to take a while to adjust to it, to adapt, and so on. So if you've worked out just about everything they can do on the planet, doesn't matter what they do. Oh, yeah, I've seen that before. Yeah, the coach talked about that last week. You know what I mean? Whatever.
Yeah.
So that's a real important part, which a lot of people sort of gloss over, actually, when they think about leadership. Some people think, oh, you're born to be a leader or something like that. But that's not the case, you know.
So you come back, and then what's happening for the next part of your career in the regiment?
Yeah, so when we came back, 2 Squadron was disbanded, right? When we got back, because they, you know, a lot of guys leave after the war. You know, no more war. I'm out of here. That's the personality you've got. I remember three boys went to Europe for a holiday, extended holiday over there, and I said, "Where'd you go?" And they said, "Oh, I went to here, there, and there, and we stayed a while in Portugal." I said, "Oh, Portugal, that's interesting." I said, "What did you do in Portugal?" He said, "Oh, well, actually, we stayed in this little fishing village on the Portuguese coast there." I said, "Oh, what, for a few days?" No, about 3 weeks we stayed there. I said, "Well, why did you do that?" They said, "Wine was 9 cents a litre." But people leave after war, right?
Yeah.
You know, these sort of people.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Their personalities. Because they're into movement, they're into adventure, they're into this and that. And that's why guys went to fought in Rhodesia and things like that, for example. So we came back, you know, there's leave and there's all of those sort of things. And then as I was mentioning to you off air, the Hans Flair DCM, Hans was picked up for OCS training. And as it turned out, you know, I put him for that as well later on, and I was picked up 6 months later, and I followed him. So I was in Hans's junior class at Portsea, OCS Portsea. So I was there, and you know, I was doing fairly well. But I had a couple of very difficult enemies there. Unfortunately, I don't mess around with enemies either, so I picked the worst enemies I could think of, which was the RSM. I didn't laugh at his jokes enough, I think, the old jock, and also the CI, you know, the chief instructor, which was a lieutenant colonel. So every time and I was doing well, you know, because I was one of the few people that stayed awake in class. I noticed there was 3 of us with Vietnam ribbons on in my class, a couple more in Hans's class. So Hans graduated with the Sword of Honour, and you know, great, you know, as you'd expect in a sense. And then he left, and so I was in junior class. So I was doing pretty well. And then every time the commandant, I think it was Colonel Butler, I think from memory then, he went away, and he didn't mind me at all. But because I, you know, with only 3 guys with ribbons on, you're sort of in the spotlight a bit. Right? So every time he went away, the old RSM and the CI would mat me, you know, sort of, you know, well, I don't know, you're not the sort of person we're looking for, sort of thing. But I always remember them teaching the how to do ambushes with claymore mines, and there was nothing like we used to do with claymore mines. I'm thinking, no, that's not going to work, mate, you know. But I didn't fight the green, you know. I was adept in the classes and all those sort of things, and I just got stuck into it as I normally do. But in the end, just before we were about to graduate, and I was my senior class, we went away on our last shoot. We were boarding the buses and that right before graduation, and they pulled me off the bus. They come up, "Oh, you got to go down to the orderly room," you know. And I thought, "Oh, crikey, my dad's died and my mum's died or something," you know. It sounds a bit serious. So I went down there and I was sitting outside the orderly room waiting, and I thought, oh, that's a bit interesting. And the interesting thing was I was sitting with another guy who we knew was being kicked out, you know, like 4 days earlier. It takes usually about 4 or 5 days to kick people out of there. And he was a very, you know, don't recruit this guy candidate, you know, sort of thing. He was in the junior class or something, and I was sitting there next to him on the same bench, and I thought, this is a bad combat indicator, you know. But I said, well, see what happens. So I went in, they walked me in there, and they basically said, you're not the sort of person we want to be an officer in the Australian Army, and so we're going to get you out of here. We're going to zoom you away here real quick. And I said, and this was a tactical error I made. I should have jumped up and squealed, and I'd tell my mum and all this sort of thing, like normal civilian cadets would do, and they usually get a second chance and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't do that because I'm a professional soldier, and I said, well, and I thought, well, if that's the case, I don't want to be with you turkeys anyway. So that was my attitude at the time. I didn't say anything, and I said, yes sir, no sir, whatever. They said, go down to see the adjutant. They marched me out, and the RSM marched me out,
Wow.
I mean, it was very interesting, right? And I thought, I don't know what's happening here, really. And I go and see the adjutant. The adjutant, he was a good officer, but he very sheepishly had to type out this I won't get back at the school little paragraph on a piece of paper. He says, oh, you sort of got to sign this. And I said, give me that thing, sign, I was getting a bit angry at this stage.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then the RSM actually come back, and they went with me up to my room, and they packed me up. He stood over me while I packed my gear. This never happened before.
Yeah.
Not that I know of. And then sort of like, I think it only happens in North Korea or back of China somewhere where they expunge you from history, so like I was never in that room sort of thing,
Yeah, right.
Took all everything belonging to me out of there in the old steel trunk and stick it on the Land Rover, and then down to eat at the back kitchen of the the back kitchen of the sergeant's mess. I'm sitting there having a sausage or something, and then from there I went straight on the Land Rover, and I'm heading out of town, and I didn't even know where they were sending me. I have no idea.
Yeah, right.
And I was in there, and my fiancée at that time, wife to be, she was working in a bank at Rosebud or something. And as I went past on the Land Rover, I got the driver, some transport guy, to stop, and I get on the phone box there. I rang up and said, they're kicking us out. They've kicked me out. I don't know where I'm going. I think I'm going to Melbourne somewhere. They actually wouldn't tell me where I was going. And they're sending me the Watsonia personnel depot, actually, to be with the other bags, And so I said, oh, and we had a place there, we had all our gear in an apartment there, and, that she was down and living at Rosebud somewhere. So the whole life's turned upside down, right?
Yeah.
Jiffy. And so it's illegal, they got me to do the disclaimer and all that sort of poop, And so that was pretty interesting. So I ended up in the I walked in, the Watsonia wasn't expecting me at all. Who are you? I said, I'm Kilsby, I've just left Port Sea and I'm an SAS bloke, And they went, oh shit. So I hung around there for a few days, and I didn't know what to do. Whether do I get out of the army now? Do I go back? And I thought, I wasn't ready to. I didn't know what I could do out of the army, so I said maybe I'll just go back to the regiment. They said, we'll send you back there. So I went back to the SAS regiment. I was a little bit concerned about that in a sense, because I thought the blokes would pull the mickey out of me big time. You didn't make it, sort of thing. But not one person ever said anything to me. They just said, I'm glad you're back, mate, sort of thing.
So did they ever tell you why?
Well, they said it's conduct on unbecoming an officer cadet, and that was it, So various things that I did they didn't like, and they added it all up, and they didn't like me.
Yeah, right.
So later on, I ran into all my classmates, because they're all, majors, and colonels, and even brigadier here and there, over the next few years, over the next several years, and many years. And they said, well, what happened to you? No one told them where I went. They just said he disappeared,
Yeah.
And what happened to you? Because and they told me actually that I was in line for the Sword of Honour, and I was and all the results had just come out for all the academic stuff, and I think I was 5th out of 114 cadets in the academic results.
Yeah, right.
And so one door closes, right?
Yep.
And slam shut in this case, and it's sort of and I even write this in my book in the prologue, so it stung me. And it stunned my classmates because they didn't know where I'd gone, and I was one of the sort of characters there. And but what it did was it allowed me to go back to the regiment, and what happened then? I went back to one squadron.
Yep.
And what happened? I went to one squadron. And what happened then was it opened up a new field for me, which was unconventional warfare. So one door slammed shut. And in a way, it was good that it slammed shut because I would have had a lot of conventional army stuff, being a junior officer and all that sort of thing. Probably would have been a bit boring, from for the likes of me, till I got through all that and gone back to SAS or something like that. But UW opened up, and I was one of the first people picked in that, and that became my greatest thing in my main specialty in the military, UW. So it's like, hey, Graham Brammer picked me up in his patrol sort of moment, So that's how life works, right? And so I get into it with a vengeance and crack on.
So talk me through that, because you're building this capability and this becomes your specialty. You do this for the next, decade of your career?
So it only lasted for a short time, UW initially.
Yep.
So Colonel McFarlane was the CO when I went back there, and he was quite an unconventional officer. I thought he was a very good CO. Therefore, it's sort of a bit incongruent to have a conventional officer in charge of an unconventional unit, supposedly, right? So he was good. We've had some conventional ones there, which, who were there on behest of the army to clean it up or something like that here and there. Get rid of these warriors and all that sort of caper. It seems to be a cyclic thing in the military that the sergeant's mess has got too much power. Let's go and dissipate all that stuff and get the glove back on and all this sort of hoo-ha that happens in peacetime, right? This is peacetime stuff.
Well, we're in peacetime now. Look at look at it now.
And it's starting to do the same sort of stuff.
That's right.
Paint them rocks, So I was in the class of 73. So the guys that had gone away and they'd liaised with the Brits 22 and stuff like that, and they started it up, and they became the cadre of the instructors for the first class of 73, and that's what I was in. And then they actually, B Troop, which was a water ops troop, that became the first UW troop.
Right.
Fully UW, right?
Yep.
So it was, but of course, so we were doing all that, and a lot of us are doing even correspondence course with the Green Berets, university and all this sort of stuff.
Right.
Picking up that sort of stuff, but that lasted for about till about the end of 74, 75, till 75, and then COs changed and they said, "Oh, we're not doing this anymore." So I'm thinking, all I'm going to be doing is hanging about an unconventional, conventional unit, training officers for their tick the box, And I thought, no, I'm looking for movement here, so I put in for a language course.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to language school in 76, doing a full year of Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, actually.
I know. I just want to highlight. I want to go back in 1973. You deploy on a big, the first motorcycle exercise.
Oh yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was a big exercise up in the Kimberleys. And this was before I went into UW. So when I just come back, this is not long after I come back.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And I'd done a lot of work on in my life when I was a kid, working on the land with motorbikes, mustering cattle and sheep and stuff. So I could ride bikes and things like that. So that's when they said, right, are we going to have a couple of motorbike patrols, one in one squadron and one in three squadron with the vehicle mounted troop, right? So they start riding bikes as well. So I was picked up in one squadron for C Troop, which was the vehicle mounted there. I was in B Troop with water ops, and they said, "Oh, you can ride. Come with us, and we'll put you on a bike." I said, "No worries. That sounds like fun." So I went up there, and that was really interesting. That was the start of the bike thing. So all through those peacetime years, the vehicle mounted boys in 1 and 3 squadrons, they're the ones that pioneered all the vehicle mounted stuff, which became so important later on in Iraq and Afghanistan. Especially in Iraq when they first went there.
Yeah.
So all of those, all of the successes that we had later on, not only because of the personalities involved, but because all the hard work done, especially the vehicle mounted boys, pioneering this and working on this, and fantastic. So I was a little part of that, being one of the motorbike boys on that patrol. Yeah. So So it's not a claim to fame, but it's interesting.
Yeah, of course, yeah, and to see what would go on in the future, and as you mentioned, Iraq, Afghanistan, and
then after that, then I went into the UW business.
And then you, as you mentioned, you went and studied your language. So you go to the RAAF School of Languages and study Mandarin and Chinese.
Yeah, well, Mandarin is the Chinese.
Oh,
language.
right.
So
and what was that like? Talk me through that.
Well, it's sort of it was one of the hardest years I've done, actually. The reason for that is it was so intensive. So Mandarin was one of the more difficult languages of the world because it's got tones in it, and it's got a different writing system and all those sort of things. And at this School of Languages, it's a very old institution. It was at Point Cook RAF base in those days. I believe it's moved up to Canberra these days, but it was at there, and they've got all these different languages. So you had a couple of blokes doing Russian and a few blokes doing Vietnamese still. You had a Indonesian course, quite a large Indon Malay course there. And then you had a handful, maybe 5 or 6 of us doing Mandarin Chinese. And some, a handful doing Japanese, right? And it was basically the government language school. And so you had people from all the 3 services go there and so on. And also civilians from the Defence Department, one of which was on our Chinese course. And so the difference between the Indons, for example, and the Chinese students was that we worked, right through every day in the classroom, flat out. And then we had like 2 to 3 hours homework every night.
Oh, right. Yeah, right.
That's for the whole year, sort of thing, like 11 months or something.
Yeah.
And you had to learn how to write, right? Read and write and speak and do all this stuff. And being a difficult language, I mean, I was picked for Chinese because I can sing, right? Because I can replicate tones.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I did my tonal test and I was perfect, right? Because I can sing.
Yeah.
I can, memorise notes and things. And a lot of guys, if they can't speak tones, and a lot of people can't sing, so they can't speak Mandarin Chinese very well. They can still be sort of understood, but man, it's like this, I remember asking a guy, one of the DS, about what's Japanese like to learn. He says, it's like speaking Chinese with a mouthful of rusty nails, he says. But Chinese is difficult. So and at the end of the year, so by about 3 months, the Indonesian class, because I did a 3-month Indonesian class without hardly studying, and I was really good at it.
Yeah, right.
I was quite fluent. Almost.
Is it an easy language?
Yeah, it's easy compared to Mandarin.
Yeah.
And, I did it as part of UW, you learn the language, right? Indon there. And, but in the real, the B grade linguists, as they're trying to get to in the school, all these Mandarin guys, all these Indon guys, they're playing table tennis tournaments by about 3 months. They're just partying on,
right.
Big party time for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And the Chinese blokes, they get to the end of the year and they're speaking like grade 5 kids or something, Look at it's like hard yards.
Yeah,
so
of course.
Very hard year.
Yeah.
My first son was born in that year.
Yeah, right.
But, so it was a big year. Yeah.
And then what happens? Well,
then I changed corps, right?
Yeah, right.
So up to then I was infantry.
Yep. And
then I changed corps and went to intelligence.
Right.
Yeah, because being a linguist. Now, when I left the regiment, the CO at that time and the RSM marched me and said, "Oh, well done, you've been picked for the language course, and that's good." So, and when you come back, we'll certainly have a job for you. And I knew, because they were winding up UW, so therefore they were winding up this idea of languages and things like that. And they said to me, and I didn't say anything back to them, they said, "Oh, we'll have a place for you, make sure, when you come back, and it'd be great, And I thought, maybe I'll come back, maybe not, because peacetime and all that.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, so I went into intelligence, and I actually worked in, for, over the next several years, I accumulated something like 5 years' worth of work for DSD. Defence Signals Directorate. These days called ASD, Australian Signals Directorate. And it's one of those things, it's interesting because, you need obviously very high clearance and all that sort of stuff in there. It's one of the things I've never mentioned to people about, and I still don't mention about it really, talk about it. And it's almost like, here's my career, and I couldn't even remember I was there, sort of thing. You shut it out of your mind. And I spent 2 years in Hong Kong as a seconded to the British government there for a bit.
Right.
And so it really gave me a very broad, diverse career, in a sense, right?
Mm.
And then from there, and I was an instructor at the School of Military Intelligence a couple of times, and I didn't particularly like that in a sense, because I kept doing this. I did, get to the second year or something. I said, I've done this lesson before. That was pretty boring. I think, hang on, we've done this before,
Yeah,
It's not in my. I'm thinking, no, we've got to crack on. We've got to invent new things or create new stuff here.
Yep.
But of course, the army, just replicate. If it's not fixed, it's not broke, don't fix it. Sort of stuff.
Yep.
And so I was an instructor there for a bit, and gradually, I became a WO2 there as well. And anyway, so then I went to the epitome of my military career, in a sense, and I was picked up to be Wing Sergeant Major of the Special Warfare Wing, which was a one commando regiment detachment type thing, right? Which was UW, and down near Queenscliff there, and that's what I did. It was interesting, Adam, because it was everything I had done and learned and put together in the military all came into that one job.
Yeah, right.
It's very, very unusual for anyone to be able to say that, because most people do a bit of this, a bit of that, and so on. But it was an incredible thing, and because I was creative and did a lot of writing and all that, I had a lot to do with developing as well and things like that, and I remember we did but you're up against. It's very unconventional, right? As the word says. But you're up against the people still run the Army and the Air Force and Navy. They're very conventional.
Yeah.
I remember we had something like 13 general rank sort of guys down there, mostly from the Army, generals and brigadiers and colonels and all that, and bloody air marshals and things like that, whatever. I don't know what the rear this or vice that or something.
Rear Admiral or
whatever.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of very senior officers come down. And there was about 13 of them, and we gave a big demonstration, or like they sat in on one of the classes and did all that stuff, and then they had a big dining in night that night, and the wing boss and his offside, the 2IC, the two captains, they went along to this dining in night, and I was pretty excited. I thought, we've given them the whole 9 yards, these blokes. We were selling the pitch, right?
Yeah.
This will be good, and this, we'll get something out of this for UW, and we'll start developing it even faster now, Anyway, I said in the morning, I said, how'd it go? You must have had a great night. There must have been a lot of discussion about what we said. And I said, no, they didn't talk anything about it. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, they didn't really, they're just having a good time on the port or whatever. They didn't say anything about UW or as far as we could tell.
Yeah.
I said, wow. Didn't they say anything about us or about, what we did? Or they said, no, not really. They did. There was a comment a couple of them made. I said, oh, yeah, what was that? Looking for any breadcrumbs. And they said, yeah, they were a bit concerned about the length of the warrant officer's hair. That was me, man. And I thought, well, there you go. And so around about that time, because I was there for 2 years, which was a great, fantastic 2-year time, and I'd done a lot of writing and everything, and then the Army came back and said, I was in the Int Corps, right, still. I was the first Int Corps to do that job, which was always an infantry job.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, so the Int Corps came back to me and said, oh, this is exciting, we've got your next job for you. And I said, oh, what's that one? They said, oh, I want you to go back to the regiment as a WO1, the first, more or less the first WO1 Int guy in the headquarters. And of course, later in the piece, there's been huge amounts of intelligence support and all that sort of thing for the Iraq and the Afghanistan. And, it's been huge, really. But in those days, it wasn't much. So I mean, I've missed out on once I missed out on going back to the regiment, actually, somehow we jumped that chapter.
Yeah.
But I'll just mention it briefly.
Yeah, please,
in a minute.
mate.
But
Please do.
I'm on a roll now for getting out of the army, sort of nearly. And they said, "Oh, we got this job for you," and they were very surprised. I said, "No, I don't think I'll work it." If I'd done that, I probably would have been involved with Iraq and Afghanistan later on. As an old warrant officer or something.
Yeah.
But I decided that I needed to get into my second battlefield here and go and do business in China and all that sort of stuff, right? So, yeah, they were quite surprised. So then I got out of the army. So we'll come back to that. But
Yeah.
I'll just jump back on that because I was when I came back from Hong Kong. Sorry about missing that.
No, you're right. Best thing about a podcast, mate. You can jump back
Yeah,
and forth.
I do apologise.
No, don't apologise,
So
mate.
when I came back from Hong Kong, at that time I was going to get out of the army. And I was going to be able to introduce companies in Australia to doing business in China, right? China things and all that. And I knew China and things. And Bill Forbes rang me up. And hopefully one day he'll listen to this podcast because Bill Forbes was in my view, probably the best Special Force, SAS officer that he was the troop commander of B Troop, the first UW troop. Right?
Yeah, right.
As a lieutenant, even second lieutenant. I don't know, back in the early days. But he's brilliant, right? Yeah. And he's always been a good friend, and he's unconventional. See, very unconventional. And a terrific guy. And he rang me up and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm getting out of the army, I'm going to introduce companies into China and things like that." I was in Melbourne, he's in Perth. And he said, "Oh, what about coming back to the regiment?" And I said, no, peacetime, nothing going on, painting rocks, training up officers to tick their boxes. No, I don't want to do that. I've done that. I've been there, done that, And, I've been a shooter. I'm past that. Peacetime. You can't be a shooter in peacetime. And he said, no, I'm not talking about that. He says, "I'm picking up a squadron, 3 Squadron. Now he's an OC. Right? I want you to come back and do my int for me, intel." And I went, "Nah, Bill, nah. I'm getting out of the army." I sort of made my mind up. And he said, "Oh, I'll think about it." I said, so I got off the phone. About half an hour later, the old heart's going bang, 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 they ring him up. "Yeah, Bill, I'm back, man." So I went back to the SAS, and that was in right at the end of 1979 and 1980, early 80, and went into 3 Squadron to run there before Bill came home. He was waiting to pick up that squadron, and Reg was there, and he was running the squadron, and so I was the in sergeant. If that's the role there of the squadron.
Yeah, right.
And so I did all their intel and stuff like that, and then from there. And I went into, and then Bill took it over after Reg, and I was there for a year or so. And then I went into 1 Squadron to run there for the CT work.
Yes.
So then I started 2 years constant CT work, because normally guys would go in there for a year and then they'd swap over because they ran the trickle system through 1 Squadron. There's a CT Squadron.
So that, and I want to touch on that CT role. Was that in its, like, when you were in Vietnam, was that picked up in the late 70s, or had the regiment always had a CT role?
No. So when I was in Hong Kong, that's when the CT thing started.
Right.
And ironically, or not ironically, but coincidentally, it was mostly the guys that had been in B Troop in the UW who'd done all this special training, because we did all sorts of demolitions and different stuff, like advanced sort of weapons and all sorts of things in there. It was quite advanced sort of stuff in that day. And a lot of those guys, they became the forerunners of that. Then they went again to, well, not again, but they took those guys from the B Troop, and some of those went to the POMs and the 22, and they picked up the CT stuff from there and all that sort of thing, and brought it back, and they were the Carter to start the CT work.
Right, yeah.
While I was still in Hong Kong.
So, and I'll jump in here because I just want to highlight to the civilian listener what Rob is talking about is that this is the the foundation of Tag West. This is the CT when he's talking about counter-terrorism. Yeah. This is the foundations of
the tag.
Yeah. So, and the building of Tag West. And now, if you come over to the East Coast, there is Tag East, which is two commandos role. So there's Tag West, Tag East. So just clear that up for the civilian.
So in the early years, there was only one tag. The SAS did it all.
Yeah.
And then, probably gratefully, they formed the commandos, and it was interesting. Just a sort of a half step backwards here during the when I was doing B Troop UW, and those years, we used to say, God, they got to make a regular commando regiment or something, regulars, so they can take all this raiding stuff off us. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the unconventional part. So in the regiment, you had two types of people. This is my observation, right? Some modern intellects probably, no, that's not the way. But we had two types of people. We had what I used to call the commando elite people, and then we had the true SAS people. So because we had a raiding job as well in the SAS, so we had to do raids, we had to do sort of commando work and SAS work, and so you have found some people orientated towards more the commando style of profile, mission profile, and you had some people who are more sort of the more unconventional SAS type of profile, working in smaller groups and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
but it used to bug us doing all these squadron raids, and what are we doing this for? Some of us thought. So we were very, very happy when they brought in 4 RAR commandos, then 2 regiment. It was brilliant. From our conceptual point of view. For some of us anyway.
Yeah.
So when I came back from Hong Kong, I said to some of our guys who now aficionados in the CT business.
Yeah.
I said, what's going on here? Isn't this a police work? Because I thought this is police work, right?
Yeah.
It's not, military don't do this, do they? Or what? They said, no. Well, it sort of is police work, but I was told by a couple of of our more senior guys said this is pretty good because it keeps our young men with full ammo guns, I mean,
yep.
And the SAS over the years has been very good at taking opportunity to reinvent itself, because it's sort of a bit like the fire brigade, no fires, no funding.
That's right.
If I can put that in a little...
of course you can, mate.
Yeah, a little quote that I used to use with Jim. But it's the same with the military. If there's peacetime, you get all these people in the Lost Command there in Canberra saying, I wonder what we can make them do now or not make them do. Well, let's get rid of these. They're costing money. Let's sell their base. We'll be able to make a lot of money putting apartments up there and stuff like that. So CT, in a sense, was a new role that saved the regiment. And they got into it, big time,
Very much
fully professional, be the best in the world sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well,
I remember working with SEAL Team 6 when they came over.
Right.
They came over with their what was it, Galaxy or whatever they had, brought a couple of little birds and a Black Hawk over for the first time we'd seen that. And SEAL Team 6, and they had their CT sort of team on there, and they learned a lot from us because they thought, crikey, they were running around with 6-shot pistols and stuff like that, and all sorts of things, but they had a lot of kit. But they learned a lot from our guys who were right into it, following the Brits who'd done the Iranian embassy and all that sort of thing by then, of course. So, it was very, very interesting. Our guys are incredibly professional. Whatever they do, they do it full 110%. And get the results they're there for.
Well, I know. So go back and listen to episode 97 with Dan Fortune, where Dan talks about the early days of being on CT in the early 80s, and and the mid to late 80s before he went away and did his officer selection.
Absolutely,
and it was a real insight to hear how you're talking about the capabilities that you were part of in the early days.
Yeah.
And then it was going forward, and Dan talks about that. So go back and listen to Dan's episode. And, mate, I'll go forward.
Yeah, he's a good man, Dan. I get on well with him.
He is, mate. And it was it's a highlight to have him on the podcast, mate. It's a highlight to have any of you on, and go back. Great episode, and mate, in 1984. This is where you now you make the decision to, after 22 years in the army, you decide to call time on your career. Well, what made you come to this?
1984, so what initially happened was that, so I'm in the Int Corps, right? Mm-hmm. So I did for 2 years straight, I was Alpha Delta. I was the guy running the intel for the squadron, doing CT nationally.
Yeah.
And I had a section of guys there, and I used to write all the scenarios, all sorts of things. So when that finished, and that I needed a break after that. It was
intense.
Most people did 1 year, but I was doing it 2 years on every gig and everything. So then, going back to it, the Int Corps said, "Well, you've done your 4 years back in the regiment. We want you to," and they actually wanted me to go back to Hong Kong as a staff sergeant or something like that, one of those things. And so I got all ready for that, and was just about to go, and then I had my wife and I separated. I had a divorce, right? She was my choice, but so it was pretty traumatic. And had an 18-month-old boy and all this sort of stuff. So, a young boy, and it was pretty traumatic. So I'm actually that wasn't the case then. That was before. But so 84 was my 84. The end of 84 was my last time in the regiment. My military home, basically. Mm-hmm. And I walked out of I gave him a final, very truncated speech in the sergeant's mess, the House of 1,000 Serpents in there. And I just gave accolades to two men. One was to Ian Rasmussen, who taught me how to patrol, and Graham Brammer, who taught me how to scout. And they're both legends, they're fantastic people. So in 84, I thought, well, I've got to go back, but the Hong Kong thing didn't happen. So I went back and was an instructor at SMI and things like that, in the School of Military Intelligence and so on. And that's when I picked up that job to go back to Victoria for the UW, right?
Right.
And then I got out of the military in 1990. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I did a lot of soldiering then. So sorry about all this. But
no, you're right.
The older you get, the more things you got to stick in there.
Yeah. So 1990, mate, you make this.
Up,
you finish, and every veteran and every first responder I've ever spoken to struggles with transition. Yeah. This is all you'd known for since 1969. You'd been in the army. Yeah. How did you transition?
Okay, well, I transitioned really well. Because I, train hard, play easy, right? Mm-hmm. So, basically, I remember telling someone, much to their surprise or chagrin, that I had a really good career. I worked out where I wanted to go, and I got the army to send me there. So I was in charge of, my book, be in charge of yourself, right?
Yep.
So I've always been in charge of myself, and I've been accumulating that over decades. So when I got out of the military, I'd already worked out what I was going to do, how I wanted to go there, what I needed to do to prepare. I thought it was time. Basically, I thought I need to go to my second battlefield here. What's the second battlefield? Business. I need to get into business, make money, do something exciting, create something new. It was peacetime. 1990 is peacetime. So if it was wartime, I would have stayed in the army, forever. If it was operations, because I'm operational. I'm an operator. So I got out and got into that side of it and did lots and lots of different things, mostly working for myself. I was a middle-aged carpenter between missions and all sorts of things. But, you know, I ran my own businesses. I did a lot of marketing and sales and things like that. And then I picked up with Jim Truscott, and he was an ops officer with Bill Forbes, right, in the squadron. And he was the best operations officer I've ever seen in a squadron, ever. And so the triumph was there. It was really good. And he was out on his own then with the crisis management and things like that. So I joined him in that, and we did a lot of writing together and a lot of concept stuff together, and that was brilliant for me. So all the way through that, and then by about 2000 and so right through the early 2000s, you know, while everything was happening, you know, Iraq and Afghanistan and Timor, you know, before that. And then, but I was completely imbued with my main mission here, you know, in the second battlefield, as I call it. And we had a thing in my family which we brought the kids up with, you know, which I live by: do your best today and enhance it tomorrow. It's good enough to bring kids up with. And so I applied that to myself all the time and did the best I could. So then I was going out the back door. I got to say, I was a late comer to PTSD diagnosis, and I remember the first psych person who'd been used to a lot of Vietnam vets said to me. Eventually, I went there. I went there for my wife, really, to secure something for her, because I didn't care about myself at all. You know, that's what happens when you get that. And she said, "You've got." I said, "That's a big fat file you've made out of 7 visits here. What's going on there?" You know, because at that time I'd done it 2 or 3, had a bit of a go, but I'd walk in there and sell myself as the most positive bloke that I'd ever seen. You know? Yep. This time I said, "Righto, I'll just answer the questions honestly and tell them what they want to ask. You know, and tell them the answer." And so she had a big fat file on me. I said, "What's in there?" She said, "I've got to tell you that you're one of the worst cases of PTSD that I've ever seen in a Vietnam veteran." I said, "No, that can't be right." I said, I've done nothing. I've taken nowhere. You know, what have I done? You know, nothing. You know, because I've always had a thing, just doing my job, right? It's just you just do your job and get on with it. I never thought about it much in that respect. She said, "No. What you've said is actually, you know, you've got a lot of things happening there." And I said, "Shit, okay." But she said, "But the thing is, you've actually got the best coping mechanisms I've ever seen in anyone who is a Vietnam veteran."
Yeah, right.
And that's why you're still here after 40 years, and you know you're still walking around chipper, you know. And she said, "So far, there's so much so that I'd like you to come back. I'm going to get some of my other psychiatrist colleagues, and I want you to tell them how you do that stuff, that coping mechanism stuff." And I went, "Nah." The one-trick cyclist is too many, you know. So but that'd drive me crackers if I did that. So I didn't do that. But so it was interesting. But after the crisis management work started to ease off and all that, it's sort of I was starting to unravel, you know, because by this time I'm working out I need a mission. And when in transition getting out, I was going to another mission, so I was good. A lot of guys, you know, they live in the past. You know, they think, "Well, what can I do now? I've been a soldier all this time. Soldier is me." Yeah. No, it's not the truth, right? It's not the case. Soldier ain't you.
It's one chapter
you
of your
are
life.
You.
Yeah.
And you know you're good at this or good at that, but you know unless you want to throw yourself under a bus, you're going to have another life, as many lives as you want. And that was always my attitude. So I was well posed to have a really good transition. But I certainly understand, because I've seen it so often, and I've helped many guys transition, because you know there's an old saying: you can use the past in 2 ways. You can use it as a school to learn from, or a club to beat yourself with. Unfortunately, most people I meet use the latter.
Yeah.
They walk around with a big bag of rocks over their back. So I've never done that, right? So I've always used it as a school to learn from, but I don't live there. You know, Mark Twain says, talk to me about the future. That's where I live.
Mm.
That's where I'm going to live.
Very true.
And I think Marcus Aurelius 2,000 years ago said that as well, something like that.
Yeah.
But so going back to starting to unravel, because I couldn't see a mission. You got to do things. The older you get, the more meaningful your life's got to be, I've got to say, as a tip.
Yeah, right.
When I say the more meaningful, it's got to be meaningful at least,
Mm.
Otherwise you're just sitting around being there, breathing there, watching the paint dry. Easy way to death.
Yep.
Smart, quick, slippery slide to death.
Mm-hmm.
Humans are made for activity, not for rest, right?
Yep.
So
rest when you're dead.
Well, that's exactly right. Unless you're Buddhist, you're only here once, right?
That's right. Yeah,
You've got to fill it up.
Yeah, that's right.
That's my view on life. So I was starting to unravel though, and then luckily I found motorsport. And I actually initially thought, because I was an Alfa Romeo guy, I picked up an new Alfa in Hong Kong and I brought it back, and I was an Alfisti, and anything Alfa Romeo was fine by me. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
So I was an Alfa Romeo guy, and I thought, well, I've got to have something to do while I'm going out the back door here backwards. I was starting to start thinking about taking pictures of me off the wall and all that sort of caper. I was pretty bulletproof for suicide though, and the reason for that is, and this is worth sharing, I think, is that I figured that I read somewhere that people who take their own life leave a terrible, terrible legacy for their children in particular and other people around them close, right? And I determined that, well, I ain't going to do that. So to me, I'm bulletproof, right? I'm bulletproof for that.
Mm.
I mean, I don't mind cracking by accident or something like that. I've never been afraid of death, I've got to say. But I can say that literally going right back to Vietnam times.
Yeah.
I'm more worried about being maimed or badly injured or something like that.
Mm.
But I've never been a warrior. I've been a warrior, but I haven't been a warrior. I've trained myself to an absolute bee's whisker about. I spend no emotional energy on things I can't control, and that's all part of being in charge of yourself.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant thing, right?
Absolutely.
So it saves you a lot of angst in your life, and you can get on with it. And the other thing I'd say, if you can get up in your own helicopter, you can see a long way. It's called vision.
Very true.
If you're on the ground with the rest of the guys, all you're doing is bumping into fences. You can't see the top of the door or the lock for the door or the pole vault to get over or under, etc.
Mm.
So you're with the lemmings in a sense. But if you get up in the helicopter, you can see where to go, and then you can plan to go there.
Mm.
Simple as that. So this mission, I found a new mission, motorsport, and then luckily early in that piece, through actually talking to a veteran who'd been wounded in two commander regiment, IED wound, and he was running a Datsun rally car in Targa, Tasmania.
Mm.
I was doing Targa because it was the hardest thing you could do, right? But then I found this guy. He was working with Legacy, and then I came up with an extrapolation of that idea. Why don't we have a rally team and bring in veterans who are doing it hard for transition even, or from recovery from psychology and physical wounds, and let's have veterans doing tarmac rally as crew members, as navigators. I had a rally car, so I'm driving. I have navigators and crew guys. So now we're working in small teams, pursuing excellence. Perfect mission. And it works like crazy, right?
Yeah.
So I built this program, and in due course, I did it for over a decade. Been doing it for over a decade, and it's called Veterans in Motorsport. And it's really, really beautiful. It's a brilliant program. So then later on, that mission started to get a bit difficult because, I paddled a sea kayak 2,450 clicks down the Murray River back in time for my 70th birthday. I just got back for that. And I thought it was a little bit arduous. This was when COVID was on, all sorts of things, the left bank, right bank of the river, depending on what state was wanting to do what. And I did it also with a good mate, senior chief clearance diver in his day. But anyway, I got to the end of that and I got back home in time for my 70th birthday. And about a month later, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I thought, no wonder the trip was a bit arduous, because I've been doing it with cancer the whole time. And so all of 2022 was full of the diagnosis and the treatment and the recovery from stage 4 cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so I got through that, and it's been an uphill battle in a sense from there to recover. And then in so 23 is back in running the team. We had a couple of really successful rallies and helped some really good veterans, and that was great. And then 24, in about mid 24, I had 2 open heart surgeries for 2 double open heart surgeries for a triple bypass and so on. And then so it took over a year to recover from that. So my second battlefield was a bit patchy, you might say, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people ask me about this, and I'll just mention this before we go on.
Sure.
They say, oh, you know, how do you... Because a lot of people don't recover from these things very well. And I say, well, this is the way I look at it. To me, they're just another mission to handle. That's the first thing. So what I do is I find the best medical team specialist, whatever I can do. Luckily, you know, I'm the TPI go-kart, so if I didn't have that, I'd be dead long ago. I can't afford the medicine. You know what I mean? But I find the best team I can find, and then what I do is I call them my medical army, and I let them get on with their specialist work, and then I get on with my work, being in charge of myself and running
do what you got to do. Second battlefield.
And this was fine. So I then came back, but because of my cardio, I've eventually had to come to grips with this. In terms of being a rally driver, you've got a navigator sitting next to you, male or female. Some of the best navigators I've had have been female, actually. You're in the business of saving each other's life, right? That's the way I sort of think of it. And it's fantastic. But you can't, if you've got cardio issues that could be or not, right? If you've got cardio issues, it could be or not. You can't just rocket through the countryside up to 200 kilometres an hour with no runoff areas and no kiddie litter and stuff like that. You know, it's a difficult thing to do.
It's dangerous too.
And, in 2013, I was 6th in Australia in the Target Championship as a pure, cheapest chips, baggy-ass privateer, So it's been successful. But I thought, I've got to retire as a rally driver because I don't, a duty of care to my navigators, So I thought, well, man, what am I going to do now? So I'm always planning. I've always got 3 plans in the pot. Always looking ahead. And so I decided, well, as long as you can stand up, my brain's still cutting through. So as long as you can stand up, well, I thought maybe this is what I'll do. I'll be a keynote speaker and give my experience and life's expediency to others who care to listen and would like to improve themselves. So that's my 3rd battlefield now, and here we are. And
we're gonna talk about this now because it segues beautifully into finish off, and then I've got a few final questions, and it's just been an absolute, to sit across from you. And
sorry, long answers.
No, mate. No, mate. We're capturing your life. And it's getting locked into history. So this is why we do the podcast. And mate, wherever you want to talk, mate, I'm happy to listen.
No, it's a pleasure being here, mate.
And
privilege,
mate. You've now become a keynote speaker, and you've also become an author. So congratulations on being. I know that feeling as well, mate. Yeah. Being a fellow author, congratulations. And was that a cathartic process?
No, it wasn't actually.
Right.
And I wrote my book in 2 months. So the reason why the book came about, because a lot of people have come up to me in the last few years and said, "Oh, mate, you've got to write a book. Think of the legacy for the kids. They'll remember you instead of forgetting you." All that stuff that people go on with. You've had an interesting life. You should tell people. And I'm thinking, no, that'd be boring. I can't imagine anyone. There's been a lot of guys, from the regiment as well, who've written their memoirs and this is my life and all this. And I'm thinking I don't want to be number 13 or down the track and everyone in on the bandwagon. I'm not into that. But then when I decided, to do a keynote speaker, I attacked it like everything else I've tried to attack, and said, well, I've got to do my very best here. I don't want to be just an average speaker. I want to be a bloody good speaker, a great speaker. How do you do that? Well, I've invested time and money, and so I'm training. So it's like going back and doing your reinforcement cycle in the regiment or something like that. I mean, I'm flat out. I'm into it full time. And it came to me that I'm going to have to write a book. It's my IP, right? My
Correct.
Intellectual property. And I thought, okay, well, I can do that. And I set my sights to, like everything I do, I said, right, I've got to write 1,000 words a day, 5 days a week. I found the only time that I had a bit of time off in the day, in a sense, was that evening after dinner sometime. I might have 2 hours there instead of watching TV or something useless like that. So I set that, but then I realised I had to tell people where this book's coming from, these principles and all this sort of stuff. So the book title is Ultimate Freedom, the 5 fundamental principles to being in charge of yourself. Right? And everyone I've ever talked to about this thing, just about everybody that I mention, this is my message and all that, they say, wow, I'd like a bit of that. I'd love to be in charge of myself. So it's an absolute gold thing because it's very deep and profound. It covers everything. And it is ultimate freedom. If you're in charge of yourself, you're in charge of yourself. That's it. You can't be more free than that. So it works out pretty well. So I worked out the principles. They just came to me because I've been living them for a long, long time. I've been in charge of myself for a long time, much to someone's, the occasional disappointed onlooker.
Yeah.
The most prevalent by far, the most prevalent thing that people say on their deathbeds, according to Bronnie Ware, who wrote a book, The Top 5 Secrets of the Dying, actually. And they've been writing this for thousands of years. It's not a new thing, but she's a palliative care nurse, so in modern times she's written down all these sayings that people say on their deathbed.
Yeah, of course.
And the top one by far of the top 5 was I wish I'd had the courage to live my own life rather than the life that others expected of me. Interesting stuff.
Absolutely.
By far, it was the most prevalent stuff.
Well, you look at how many people do that. They live through the lens of other people and other people's approval, and
it's a normal thing. It's not because they're deficient. It's right from when we're kids. We want to fit in. We want to be part of the group. It's the human way. Stick together. We're a herd animal sort of thing. So it's very, very important in the normal life of people, and you want to fit in. People even try, as I've done along the way, we even try to change my personality so I can fit in better with my family, instead of being this grumpy sort of guy out of Vietnam or something,
Yeah.
But of course, you can't change your personality.
No.
And so I've learned this over many decades now, and I've lived that. And so I figure that I can stand on a stage and I'm happy to speak in public, which is a big fear for a lot of people. So I'm happy with that, and I've been, done a lot of training and instructing and all that sort of thing. So I figured, well, maybe this is something this is my third battlefield.
Yeah.
So, but in the book, I had to write the prologue. I had to tell people where this book came from. So I've had to sort of give this podcast the first part of the book as a prologue, right?
Yes.
And I wasn't going to do that because I didn't want to write a book about myself or anything. But all of a sudden I had to, so I was forced to. So I've been pretty happy the way the thing, because it was all in the head. I've been living it for decades. It all just came out. So it's going to be about 163 pages. It's right in the last stages of publishing now. It's up for pre-sale orders. People can look at my website, robertkilsby.com.
Yep, and we'll put a link all in the show notes so they can go straight to it.
And they can go in there. They can get a book, really top, pre-sale price, and I'll sign it and get it to them and everything. But it's a cracker of a book. I've had some really good people write testimonials for it, for the manuscript. Graham Brammer, my esteemed patrol commander, has written a foreword for it, which I'm very proud of for Graham to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
For me. Harry Moffat.
Previous guest on the podcast.
Write a really good testimonial. Terry O'Farrell, OAM, Mick Malone, OAM, these are all authors, combat veterans, SAS guys, they've all written testimonials and everything's a cracker,
Yeah, good.
So, and a couple of my psychologists had a look at it and they reckon it's brilliant. So I'm very happy how it's turned out, actually. I'm sort of surprised in a way.
I'm not. I'm not at all. In your meticulous planning and your whole career and everything you've done.
I banged it out and it's good, but it wasn't something I had to think about too much because I've just been living that. So it's very experiential sort of book.
Oh, mate, as I said, I can't wait to get a copy and I can't wait to see you, step on stage, mate, and do what this is the next part and this is where you've always, as you've said throughout the whole podcast, you've always had the next plan. And this, if any veteran or any first responder takes away from your podcast, is have that next plan. And Harry speaks about it so well in his podcast where he said, you're not going to stay in the regiment for 40 years. No. You might have an accident. You might, one person in the next, one of three will be dead. Like, this is the statistics. This is, and always you've got to have that next plan, and you have done that. And this is your, as you say, this is your third battlefield. But this is the next plan, and moving forward.
The first fundamental principle actually is choices, right? Life is full of choices. A lot of people say, I don't have a choice. No, you've got a choice to not make a choice.
That's right, exactly.
Even, you can throw yourself under a bus or not, right?
Very true.
Life is full of choices. We make thousands of choices every day, subconsciously, like what I call reactionary choices, and also proactive choices, right? But so you've got a choice, and a wise and wealthy man once said to me, he said, you can run your own day, or you can let your day run you. You choose.
Yep, very true. Very true.
So you just got to ask people and ask yourself, look in the mirror and say, you choose. What do you want,
mate? There's only
end of story.
Exactly, and there's only two certainties in life: death and taxes. That's it. Everything else, it's up to you. It's what you put in.
You can have a good day or you can have a bad day.
Exactly.
You choose.
Exactly right.
I got to tell you, if you choose to have a bad day, you can have a bad day.
Certainly
and a lot of things happen to all of us, but it's not about what happens to us. It's what you do about what happens that matters in life. And I'd say to all those ladies and gentlemen who are transitioning from not only from the military, but from first responder stuff, things that really take a lot of guts and a lot of teeth to get into, and you're not that job. You are you, and lucky for that job, you've taken it on in the service of others.
Absolutely.
So the thing is that, people say, I used to say flippantly, people say, what if you couldn't do that? I say, well, what are they? If I don't do that well, and so what are they going to do? Send me to Vietnam? It's already finished. Everyone, there's always people worse off than you, and we've met them, haven't we?
Absolutely.
So you meet them every day. You can look. Go down the supermarket. You see them.
Yep.
Staggering along the aisles.
That's right.
There's a lot of people who have a lot of trauma and so on. But the trauma is never forever. The old Winston Churchill said that on the edge of every desert there's green grass, right?
Exactly.
If you find yourself in hell, just keep going.
That's right. Exactly. No, wise man.
So those sort of things are transformational, for life. And the other thing is, I'm a great believer in the old Zen statement. Be a sponge, not a rock. Don't try this on yourself. Don't try this by yourself. There's a lot of people around who help you. They work with you. They love you. Ask for help. Yeah. Don't try it on your own. There's no need to.
No,
You'll always find people, if you ask them nicely, someone will help you.
Yeah, that's right. There's always someone that, and I know myself, mate. If someone reaches out to me and asks me for help, I feel privileged because they're asking for your advice. They're asking for and since writing the book, I've had a number of potential authors reach out and say, "Can you read my manuscript for me? Can you give me a bit of advice or how do you write a book or and it's a privilege, because you sit there and go, yeah, I can help you because I've been there. I've been in your shoes, and yeah, definitely right. And mate, I've got a few final questions.
I'll just before you go. The other thing is that, and I use it as my sign-off line for my keynotes. This came from my rally time, right? My long rally time, which was 15 years long in competition, and that is our team motto was, it's always too soon to quit. It's always too soon to quit. So we're not talking about quitting is giving up, right? Yeah. You can retreat, you can retreat and go back and find another way and so on. There's an old Chinese proverb that you can walk down the wrong road for as long as you like, but you can always turn back. Yeah. So it's always too soon to quit is an absolute cracker. It keeps your head up.
Yeah. Well, I'll add in there, mate, and I'll add in the regiment's who dares wins.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Who dares wins. That's, if you dare, you can win.
Yeah, although Wayne Gretzky, the great ice hockey champion of Canada, the legend in his own lifetime, he used to say, you miss 100% of the shots you don't go for.
Right, exactly.
So the life like that is all around us. You just got to keep your eyes open, your ears open, and be open and be adaptable and be ready to take opportunity.
That's right.
No matter what happens, what door's shut, there's always another door opening. And that's what I'd say to all the guys and girls who are retiring or finishing up one meaningful job, one service job, one getting out of the service, first responders even, whatever. Crack on. Look up, crack on, get in the helicopter, see ahead,
Well said, mate. Well said. And I've got a few final questions, mate.
Absolutely, mate.
And just, wow, what a story, mate. Like, it's just been unbelievable. And, mate, how do you reflect on the men you served with in Vietnam and the guys that you've lost over the years and your time in Vietnam?
Yeah, well, let's start with the first things first. So, for most of my life, post Vietnam, or even pre-Vietnam, to me, I've just been doing my job, right? And you see a lot of guys think like this. I've just been doing my job, so I didn't think a big thing of it. I'm quietly, I know I've achieved a lot, but it's not in my. I don't compare myself with other people, right? So it's usually the people who compare themselves with other people, which is a bit of a bad trot, really. Don't do that, because you'll always find yourself not as good as some and better than others. It's just going to confuse you, I think. So I never compare myself with others. I'm in charge of myself, right? I'm doing my own mission here. That's not to be selfish, because a lot of your own mission is serving others, and so don't get mixed up between being in charge of yourself and being self-centered. That's not the case at all. In fact, one of my themes that I've noticed throughout my life, like a lot of our guys that are similar, is all about service. It's all about who can I serve and how can I serve and how can I serve best. And to me, that I'm happy with that. I'm happy to be a server, and that's made my life very rich in a way. Right? But going back to Vietnam, it was something I wanted to do. I got out of there. I've got a picture of myself with a bottle of champagne on my leg after the last patrol. The patrol, they give you a Magnum or whatever for the patrol if you survive to the last patrol, sort of thing. So that's a favourite picture, because I think, I survived another one. I have the same attitude when I get off a plane to Sydney or something, and I look at the tarmac and I said, I survived another one. That's should I? So I've always taken it for granted, in a sense, that it's just doing your job and things like that. I know that there's a lot of current social things that you got to be grateful, and and I'm thinking, well, I guess I am. I sort of don't think like that, in a sense. I don't have to say thanks for everything. I sort of take myself for granted, in a sense, and say, well, I gave it a good shot. As long as I've done my best and I learn something every day. Every day is a school day for me, right? As long as I learn something every day, and I know I can look in the mirror and at the end of the day and say, well, to hell with it, I've done my best here. And then I'll enhance it to tomorrow. That's my rule of law.
Yep.
and it's really worked for me. It made my life very uncomplicated in complicated times.
Yeah.
You know, it's enabled me to get through just about anything you could throw at me. I'm not surprised by anything. I'm unshockable. I'm literally unshockable. Part of that is because I'm numb from the PTSD. That's helpful sometimes. I got 3 superpowers I found, and I've written this in my book in the prologue. I can still think in young ways. I'm still a young thinker, which, you know, when you're young, that's all. Of course, you're a young thinker, but when you're older, like me, that's a real superpower. So I'm innately able to think young. The second one is just in recent times, really a recent couple of years, I've discovered, it's undiagnosed, but I've discovered I've got some sort of, I'm on the spectrum of ADHD.
Yeah, right.
Somewhere. Now, I've always thought of that, but I've always thought of ADHD as something real problem kids have or something like that. So I've never equated it to myself. But that's the second of my superpowers, actually. You know, spinning 13 plates at once. I've been good at that for time to time. And the last one is that I've realised over the last several years that I've now got sort of 60 years worth of observed experience. And I you know, stress that word, observed experience, in my back pocket. That's a superpower.
Very much.
A lot of people have got a lot of experience, but they haven't observed it. Right? It's sort of, this is happening now, you know, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I've always been a reflective thinker and so on. That's one of the principles, you know, in being in charge of yourself is awareness, right? And they've been writing about these sort of things for thousands of years. So I didn't make all this stuff up. I've just found the baseline of human life, I think, you know. Yeah, so.
And you reflect on, you know, you've served in the elite regiment
with the guys,
the guys.
So I've always been very, very privileged, I think, you know. I've always felt, not overawed, but I've always felt proud in a sense. The only pride I feel is to somehow have been lucky enough to be associated with these guys I've served with. Because, you know, they're just giants of people.
Oh, well, mate, you mentioned, you know, Hans Flea, you mentioned Graham Brenner, you mentioned, you know, Dan Fortune, you mentioned all these guys.
Yeah, so all of these people,
amazing people.
And they're all, you know, all in a different way. So it's just it's a sincere privilege, you know, to be part of that group. And I often talk about them, but then I realise I'm one of them.
That's right, you're part of them. And
it always surprises me, and people will actually remember me. I say, "Oh, you remember me, do you?" Well, you know, sort of thing. But so it's a great thing, and it's a great thing to have in your life. Actually, you know, some people aren't as fortunate to have that sort of champagne existence. You know, with superlative people. People say, "Oh, do you miss the army?" And I say, "Well." And it's not all that flippant, but it's a bit of flippancy in it. It's that mature age teenager coming out in me, you know. And that, no, I didn't miss the army. I wasn't in the real army in a sense, you know. That's what I view. I've always thought that. But I do miss the superlative people I serve with. Right? So, and with our patrol, you know, Hans passed away a few years ago, which was incredibly unfortunate. We thought he was to be the last to leave us. But it's been like a love affair, you know, with our five men for 50-odd years, you know. And we keep in touch to this day on phone. I'm, you know, how you go, mate? You know, ringing them up. This is a good tip, actually. One of those other 5 secrets of the dying is I wish I'd kept in touch with my friends more. So I've learned that over decades, and you know I do keep in touch with guys, and it's the wealth in your life in a sense, right? Yep. It's the intangible wealth. So as far as Vietnam goes, people say, oh, you know, it was an unpopular war and all that sort of thing. It wasn't unpopular to me. I reckon it was great, and I loved it. I was doing my job. I was doing exactly what I was trained for, and most soldiers, I think that. I saw it as, you know, we were there, importantly, we were paying our dues to America, right? It's as good as reason as any to go to war. And you know, guess what? Iraq and Afghanistan and doing that, we were doing the same. Timor was probably, you know, that deployment for guys was very Australian, I thought, because they were right on our doorstep, essentially. So that was an Australian thing more. But these going away to other places, there's nothing wrong with paying dues. And by the way, while we're doing that, we're training ourselves up for the next one.
Very true.
That's, to me, it's all plus, win-win. While I was getting ready, joining the army and getting ready for Vietnam, my girlfriend at that time was marching in moratorium marches, which I thought was a bit untidy. But she's a human. That was okay. I didn't mind because I'm in charge of myself. I'm going to war and I'm going to enjoy the living daylights out of it.
That's right,
as best I can.
Yeah.
So that, and if you're not in charge of yourself, well, you're going to worry about all those other things. And when I must admit, they had a back from Vietnam march or something for the veterans in '82, I think.
Coming home.
One, yeah. And they marched through Sydney or something like that. And I didn't want to march for them. I didn't want to march, right? And a lot of our guys did, and they thought it was brilliant. That this is really good. Because I always thought that, the only thought that I had was, I reckon the civilians should have marched down the road, and the veterans should have been on the side looking at them. You know what I mean? But that's one of those bizarre thoughts you have.
Yeah.
But I've got past that, and then I started as our ex-veterans from Vietnam time. SA Association is a strong association compared to a lot of others, and marching there, and I felt really good actually meeting them once a year. A lot of the guys you haven't seen for 30 years and things. So I generally try to get to the Anzac days and march and have a couple of beers and shoot the breeze.
Well deserved, mate.
Yeah.
Well deserved. You've served your country, and mate, I've got a couple of final questions, and then I'm going to wrap up with a quote for you. And mate, as I said, it's just been an absolute privilege to sit across from you and record your life. And as I said, the third Vietnam veteran I've had on the podcast, so it's a real privilege to sit across from you. And mate, what advice would you give to any young player out there that is thinking of joining the army but also going down the SF path?
Well, I think just looking across general people, first thing I'd say is to join the services, not just the army, but everyone's a bit different. It depends on their family background, even which way they go. But I'd say to join the army or the Air Force or the Navy. If you're in America, the Marines as well. But to join the military, to me, is a great thing for a young person because it gives a sense. These days in modern life, a lot of the young people have big troubles because I call it the information bombardment age. People have got a huge amount of choices which track they go through the jungle, right? I think really it was easier in our day. There was less choices. But I would say, even today, in the military today, there's so many things you can do. And I would say, if they're the right personality, and if I saw that the personality, then I'd say, and by the way, have a look at going in the Special Forces area. If you're in the Navy, have a look at clearance diving or submarines or something or whatever. Do something different, right? Yeah. Do something different. If you want to be different, do something different. If you want to be the same, do something the same. Yeah. Pretty simple advice, right?
Absolutely.
But Special Forces and so on, it's not, you don't go in I worked hard so I should be there. It doesn't work like that. Special Forces, you need, and that's how they did before, and I'm pretty sure they still do. They're looking for a particular type of person. And they're not looking for a whole bunch of people because a particular type of person, a lot of people who are not there and they wish they were there, it's a bit irrelevant because they wouldn't be there because they're not that sort of person. It's where they're the sort of people that drop everything else and do that no matter what. Yeah, they're going to climb that mountain or die trying, sort of stuff. Yep. And it's not because they've got a death wish or they want to be stupid or anything like that. It's just their personality. And most of them have been living like that before they get to the military. They're that sort of kid. Yeah. And, in my case, I was probably certainly that sort of kid.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And, when I look back, everything tick, I was that sort of kid, right? And most of the people who are really good in that special force type, world, for whatever. And then within that, you've got the SAS type of character, you got the commando type of character, all those sort of things. You got the UW type of character. We need a lot more unconventional warfare stuff. Is my thing that I keep preaching about, but because everything's run by conventional people, you don't see much of that.
No, that's true. Yeah,
unless we need something really strange here.
Yeah.
Usually it's sort of a bit late. Usually by the time it comes along. But I think for a young person, there's so many jobs you can do. And I'd say throw yourself at it. Just chuck yourself in there and have a go.
Yep.
And if it's not right, leave. Find something else to do.
That's right. Pretty simple advice and great advice, mate. Great advice.
And the other thing is, by all means get educated, but the fact is that a lot of people they spend a lot of time in modern life being educated. But I've got to say that, and people like Eric Thomas said this, that everyone thinks knowledge is power, right? No, it ain't. I've got to disagree with that. He said that applied knowledge is power. There's a lot of educated derelicts out there. They're highly educated, but they're not worth a cracker sometimes in terms of things they've tried to choose. It's not their fault in a sense. They've been driven that way by society in many ways. And they find out way into their life, I'm an engineer and I hate it. I should have been a florist. I would have been a millionaire, type of thing.
Yeah.
That's this being in charge of yourself. You've got to understand about yourself. But I think that you've really got to find a life, fashion yourself a life and then go and live it and get stuck into it. The old Yoda said in Star Wars, he said, there is no try, there's only do.
Very true, mate. Very, very true. And mate, great advice for any young person that is thinking of that. And, mate, looking back now and all that you've been through, was joining the Army still the best decision that you made?
Yeah, so, you make a lot of decisions in your life. To me, it was a great decision. It wasn't the best decision I've ever made. It's hard to work out what the best is, right? Because that means you only made one good decision.
True.
Well, I made lots of good decisions. It's hard to, you've got a lot of friends. Who's the best? Well, they're all different, right? So it was a good decision, though. It was timely, and it enabled my personality to live in the right home. If you,
I get it. Yeah, no, it makes sense.
And I lived in a place where I was able to create my own destiny. And you can't do that in the normal army sort of thing, in a sense.
Yep.
Up to a point. You can to a point, but it's a lot more restrictive because you've got to fit in with everything that, and that I wouldn't have survived in that sort of an army, I don't think. So it was inevitable that I had to be there in SAS if I could find something like that. Otherwise, I probably would have got out and done something else, being a circus performer or something stupid. Or, who knows?
No, and that's right, mate. I think most veterans or first responders, I ask that question, they often say, yes, it shaped who I am and where I am now. And apart from marrying their wife or having their kids, it was the best decision.
It's all important, right?
That's right, exactly. And mate, I got one final question, and then I'll finish it up. Awesome. Mate, knowing what you know now and all that you've been through, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
Well, I think what I'd give my 18-year-old self, because I was, by the time I was 18, I was already in the regiment. Right? But I think I'd give my 18-year-old self the advice to keep going, keep having a crack, and do what you think is best at the time. And I would have listened, because they're the sort of the things that my father and mother taught me, and the top people in my life taught me, including my gurus, my champions when I joined the regiment, and and I'm always my key strength is learner, right? So every day's a school day for me. So I've been doing that since I was a kid, in grade 1 right through. So inevitably I'd be open to advice, and I'd test it out, if it doesn't work, I'll do something else.
Yeah, great. That is true, mate. The day you stop learning is the day you die, and that's exactly right. And mate, if people want to get a copy of your book or get in touch, they just go to robertkilsby.com.
Yeah, robertkilsby.com.
Yep.
One word, robertkilsby.com. That's my website.
Yep.
It's really just a initial website there, but there's a little button there where you can you grab a copy of the book
and book a keynote if they want to.
Yeah. And I've got my full contact details there, my phone number, my email. Robert@robertkilsby.com is my email.
Mm-hmm.
And just give us a call or send us a note or get me on LinkedIn or get me on Facebook or whatever. I'm out there.
Yeah.
So, and then, let's talk. Ask me 100 hard questions.
Yeah, and mate,
we'll discover what the future can bring.
Yeah, absolutely. And so any veteran or first responder, get out and support Rob with his book. And it's as a fellow author, it helps when we help each other, and because we've all put in hard work to get these books published. So get around Rob and support him. And mate, what a story! Just wow.
Don't buy the book for me, buy it for you.
Yeah, that's right.
I've already read it.
Yeah,
it's a cracker.
It's
very, very useful.
I like that, mate. Very good. And mate, what a story! Just wow, we've nearly spoke for 3 hours. And what a story, mate. And as I say, mate, I'll finish with this. You've served your country with honour and brought pride to your family. You have served at the elite level, mate, and tested yourself and succeeded. And your story is one of true grit, determination, and never giving up. And the old saying, who dares wins. And, mate, just thank you for what you do now for veterans, first responders, and people who are struggling with mental health. And, mate, as I said, it's just been an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on True Blue. So thank you, mate.
Brilliant, mate.
Cheers, mate.
It's a real privilege to be here.
Thank you, mate. Cheers.
And, thanks for all your work in all your podcasts. It's a terrific thing.
Thanks, mate. I've got the best job in the world, mate. I get to sit with all you guys. So thanks, mate. And we'll stay in contact. So thank you, mate.
Thanks for listening to True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. Real talk with those that pledge to keep us safe with grit, sacrifice, and determination. See you next time.